What if Bella encounter with Edward late night? Episode number 3. I felt sick, my stomach dropped out and I couldn't breathe, my heart stilled, and I could almost feel the blood drain from my face. My mother's concerned voice sounded garbled and distant, even though she was standing right beside me, and I could feel her hand on my face. Rose kept calling out my name, but my response froze in my throat. Bella was hurt in a hospital thousands of miles away, when she was supposed to be there in Chicago, safe with me until I recklessly destroyed everything. Doc, come on, snap out of it, Emmett yelled through the phone, and my vision came back into focus. Emmett, what the hell happened? I asked urgently, finally locating my voice again. Is she alright? Is it serious? Don't know much yet. Rose just got the call from the hospital maybe 2 hours ago. Since she was on Bella's emergency contact list, we're on our way to law now, Emmett replied, attempting to keep a calm tone as he explained, but I could hear the hint of irritation beneath, something very foreign to my ears. She's not talking, won't tell anyone what happened, all they know is what they got from the neighbors who called the ambulance, and that's not a hell of a lot either. She just keeps asking for you. Guilt rushed through me even more powerfully than before. After everything that had transpired between us in the days prior, I would have thought I'd be the last person she'd want or need. I should have been on the first flight I could catch to law the night before, whether she'd have wanted me there or not. Even if she refused to see or talk to me, I'd have been there by then, maybe even prevented any of it from happening at all. I'm on my way to the airport now. I'll be there as soon as I can. Edward, what the fuck happened? He asked in a low, rough tone, almost a growl. Why isn't she there with you? Apparently, Bella hadn't spoken to Rose at all about this. It's not the time. I gotta go, I replied distractedly, my mind only wanting to focus on getting to Bella. Call me as soon as you know when you're landing. We'll be in law in a few hours and heading straight for the hospital. Will do, I answered abruptly and ended the call, turning toward my mother, who was gazing at me in concern. Bella's in the hospital in California, I have to go. Tell Dad I said bye. After giving her a brief kiss on the cheek, I rushed to the door and grabbed my jacket, practically running down the front steps of the house toward my car. My heart was hammering against the walls of my chest, and my breaths were coming so rapidly, I began to feel a little lightheaded, but nothing would keep me from getting to Bella. I began running on autopilot all the way back to Chicago until I was standing at the terminal gate at O'Hare waiting for the first flight to law I could purchase, which was still an hour away. Please God, let her be alright. Even if it means she hates me forever, just please let her be okay. I chanted repeatedly in my head as I paced the floor, much to the annoyance of my fellow passengers seated around me. But I couldn't care less. I needed to be with her. On more than one occasion throughout the 4-hour flight, the attendant asked if I was sure I didn't want a drink. My fists clenched tightly at my knees, and my leg was bouncing rapidly with the level of anxiety I was feeling, and in most cases, I would have said yes. However, each time she asked, I declined, wanting a clear head when I saw Bella again. But more than that, I knew I didn't deserve even the minute release from the anguish I was feeling, that I knew just one drink would supply me. I was the reason that Bella was in the situation she was, lying in a hospital bed, alone. She was the best thing that ever happened to me, the one woman in this world who understood and had patience with me, and I let my own past and hang-ups take over and destroy everything. My mother was absolutely correct, she wasn't Tanya. That was one of the most appealing things about her from the very beginning. I loved Bella with everything in me, and I'd never felt anything even close for Tanya, so why was I allowing just the memory of her to destroy everything I had with Bella? Because you're an idiot and a coward, Cullen. Even your own mother verified that. When we finally taxied into Lax, I wasted no time in hurrying off the plane and through the terminal in search of Emmett. I finally spotted him just outside the doors, earning several disgruntled remarks as I pushed past the group of travelers in front of me, desperate to make my way through to him. Emmett, I yelled out as soon as I stepped outside, and he turned to me, waving his arms out with an exasperated sigh. Hundreds of questions ran through my mind, but what mattered most was that she was okay. Both physically and emotionally. She had to be alright. How is she? Have you seen her? Emmett shook his head as he began leading me out toward the garage where he'd parked. No, Rose had just gone in with Bella's dad right before I left to come get you. And would you mind giving me one good reason why I shouldn't beat your sorry ass this minute? Even as the question left him, I could see the barely restrained anger as his hand closed into a fist. After watching Emmett with Bella in Vegas, and with as quickly as she'd captured my heart as well, it shouldn't have surprised me that she would have his loyalty after only meeting her once. You'll have ample opportunity to do so later. Just please, let me see her first, I replied with a groan as I lowered into Rose's car. So, you are the reason she's back in law. Son of a bitch, Emmett growled under his breath and started the car, shaking his head as he pulled out of the parking space. What the fuck happened to my friend who was head over heels? Crazy in love with this girl not even a week ago? I made some mistakes, Emmett. Can we please just leave it at that? I sighed, closing my eyes and pressing my fingertips to my temples. Well, you better fucking fix it, and fast. I've never seen you like that with anyone, even Tanya. Why does everything always come back to Tanya? I snapped, even the sound of her name causing my frustration level to rise. Because you fucking lived with her, dude, Emmett replied, looking over at me briefly. And whether you want to acknowledge it or not, what she did is completely irrelevant right now. I need to see Bella, I interrupted him in a flat tone, my gaze remaining out the side window of the car as his foot pressed on the accelerator. When we pulled up to the hospital, we found Rose pacing outside, brushing her fingers over her cheek. Panic settled in again, and my body went rigid as I saw tears streaming down her face. I quickly stepped out of the car before it had even come to a full stop, and began walking toward her. Rose's eyes caught mine and her jaw clenched, storming toward me and smacking me hard across the jaw. You fucking asshole! How could you let her come back here? Rose, baby, this isn't going to help anyone. Least of all, Bella, Emmett said calmly, rushing forward and taking her into his arms. He pressed his lips to her temple, but never took his eyes off me. How is she? She sniffled as her head lifted from his chest, shaking it slowly as her glare returned to me. She's banged up pretty bad. Broken wrist, cracked rib, bruises everywhere. She's got a pretty nasty lump on the back of her head from where she hit the pavement, but fortunately, no concussion. She still won't tell anyone exactly what happened, though, just keeps asking for him. Freaks out when anyone else tries to come near her, so they've had to sedate her. My cheek stung from the impact of Rose's hand, but every other part of me remained numb as her statement settled in on me. Bella was in there somewhere, hurt and asking for me, and a new urgency took over me. Rose, I have to see her. Tears streaked down Rose's cheek as she gazed at me, her arms slowly dropping from around Emmett, and she stepped closer to me, shaking her head. I hope to God, for her sake, that whatever's crawled up your ass for the last few days extracts itself very soon. She deserves the man I met in Vegas on Friday, not this cold, emotionless bastard that's taken his place. Come on. If I had appeared as Rose had just described, I couldn't imagine the pain it had to have caused someone who loved me as thoroughly as Bella had. She turned suddenly on her heel and began walking toward the front doors of the hospital. After a brief glance at Emmett, I quickly followed her inside to the elevator. She remained stiff beside me with her arms folded over her chest, silent until we reached the 4th floor, and she immediately called out to a man named Charlie. Even if Bella had never mentioned his name to me in the past, there was no doubting when the man turned around that I was standing face to face with her father. She resembled him in countless ways, but most especially, the unique shade of his eyes. His posture stiffened as his gaze landed on me, and I prepared myself for the wrath of this man, as he stared in the face of the reason for his daughter's hospitalization. However, he only gazed over at Rose wordlessly. Charlie, this is Edward. His eyes returned to me sharply and he stepped closer, his features etched with pain. I don't know who you are or what my little girl has to say to you, he said, his voice breaking twice as he spoke. His voice, the gravely tone added another notch to my anxiety. But please, just get her to tell us what happened. My gaze met Rose's and she shook her head before stepping toward Charlie, taking his arm and leading him back to the chair he had previously occupied. I'll take him in to see her. I watched her gently rub the back of his hand and he nodded, looking down into his lap. With all the stories that Bella had told me about her father, the broken man in front of me had been the last thing I had expected, which only made me more fearful of Bella's actual condition. Rose stood upright again and took my elbow, guiding me quickly down the hall without looking at me. He doesn't know anything. It's not my place to tell him and should be saved for a later time, regardless. Rose, I strained out as I stopped, gently grabbing her wrist, and she halted her steps. Is she really that bad? She took a deep breath before turning to face me, her voice far calmer than I'd expected. "It looks a lot worse than it is, so far. But you have to understand, Bella is her father's baby, his entire world. He's always guarded her with his life, and seeing her like that sent his blood pressure skyrocketing. And we still won't have any real answers until Bella can tell us what happened." I released her arm and rubbed my hands roughly over my face. I heard Rose's steps resume on the linoleum before coming to a stop a short distance away. My stomach tightened as I looked back up to find her nodding her head toward the door beside her. Drawing in a deep breath, I began moving toward her, my feet feeling like lead weights as my heart pounded painfully in my chest until I reached the door. As I grabbed the handle, Rose gripped my arm tightly before I could open it. "Whatever you do, don't upset her, or you'll find yourself becoming a patient here as well." I nodded silently and she released her hold on me, and I slowly entered the room. My eyes landed on Bella, and my hand rose to my mouth as I took in the sight of her. "Oh, my beautiful Bella." She lay motionless on the bed, her braced wrist resting limply at her side, and her eyes staring aimlessly out the window. Bruises marred her beautiful face, and her bottom lip swelled around the corner where it split. I looked up to the monitor beside her bed, watching and listening to the rhythmic beating of her heart. I felt helpless. There was nothing else I could do. All my years of medical training and experience, and there wasn't a damn bit of difference I could make. I was out of my element in the most familiar of environments, except for the occupant of that bed, and it was my fault she was there. As I hesitantly began making my way toward the bed, her head lolled to the side to look at me. "Edward," she spoke in barely above a whisper, and I lowered myself into the chair beside her bed. Her voice was weak, and she winced slightly as she attempted to move. "What are you doing here?" I slid to the edge of my seat and rested my hand on her arm, shaking my head. "Just rest, Bella." Rose called and told me what was going on. "How are you feeling?" Bella closed her eyes, and a tear trickled down her cheek. My fingers instinctively rose to wipe it away, but I stopped a few inches from her face, almost afraid to touch her. She surprised me when she slowly turned her head toward my hand and opened her eyes to look at me. "I should hate you right now." I sighed and nodded, my gaze lowering to the floor. "I know. But I can't," she whispered, and I looked up quickly when I felt her fingers rest gently on my hand, holding it lightly against her cheek. My eyes met hers to find more tears welling there and her lip trembling slightly. "I was so scared, Edward, so damn scared. They want me to talk, and I just can't. I'm not ready, I just..." Her body began shaking with soft sobs, and I stood to press my lips gently to her forehead. I pinched my eyes closed as her hand tightened around mine. It was as if I could feel her fear and pain through her touch. "SHH, just relax. No one's going to make you until you're ready. It's okay." "I thought I was never going to see you again," she cried softly, and I rested my forehead against hers. "I'm here, Bella," I whispered, running my thumb along her cheek. She gradually began to relax, and her breathing slowed, her fingertips tracing along the back of my hand. "Why did you come?" I lifted my head to gaze down at her, and she looked up at me hesitantly. "Why wouldn't I?" "Because things aren't right between us," she stated plainly, sadness returning to her eyes. "And I don't know if and when they ever will be." I sat down on the edge of her bed, taking her hand into mine. "Bella, no matter what happens between us, I still love you. I'm always going to care and be here if you ever need me." Her gaze held mine for a moment, skepticism heavy in her eyes. "I needed you yesterday. And the day before that, hell, all weekend," she replied as more tears began to form, and my eyes fell again to watch the path of my thumb along the back of her hand. "And I need you now. But only if you want to be here with me." I looked up to her again, and the same heartbreaking expression had fallen over her features as that night in Chicago. Lifting her hand to my lips, I brushed a gentle kiss on the backs of her fingers, and she squeezed my hand gently. "I don't want to be anywhere but here with you." Bella released a slow, shaky breath and closed her eyes, her head falling to the side against the pillow. "I'm so tired, Edward. Get some rest. We can talk more later, when you're feeling up to it." I moved to stand and she gripped my arm, wincing again from the sudden movement. "I'm not leaving, I promise." Her hold loosened on me, and I sat beside her bed again. As she drifted off to sleep, I lightly caressed her hand with my fingertips, brushing occasional kisses over her knuckles, as my eyes took her in more thoroughly. Even without knowing exactly what had happened to her, I knew from all too much experience in the that injuries like that didn't come from a simple fall. Someone had hurt her, and it was entirely my fault for not being completely open with her, for not fighting harder to keep her from getting on that plane, for stupidly listening to that voice in the back of my mind to give her space. None of it would have happened if I'd hopped on a plane the night before and gone to law to beg her forgiveness. Even in the worst of her anger, she would still be safe. Bella's rest was fitful for hours, the strain in her brow increasing by the second, until her eyes shot open with a yelp. Her fingers twitched in my hand until her gaze shot to mine, her breaths heavy, despite the pain it was causing her. Lights. Turn on the lights, she gasped frantically, and it was only then that I'd realized that it had become dark as night fell. Please, oh God, please turn on the lights. Too dark. I rose to flip the switch above her bed, and lowered to sit beside her hip. Tears streamed down her face as her eyes searched the room. Just breathe, Bella, look at me. Her gaze met mine sharply, and I felt her grip on my arm, pulling me closer to her until my forehead rested against hers. She took a deep shuddering breath, her gasps softening only minutely. He didn't touch me. I swear, he tried, but he didn't, please, believe me. Her fingers dragged roughly along my cheek, her desperate, pleading tone both tearing at my heart and sending relief through me all at once. The bruises would heal, the bones would mend, something like that would have scarred her for the rest of her life. But the guilt in her eyes was more than I could take, so afraid. Baby, it's okay, it's over. No, it's not, she whispered shakily, closing her eyes for a brief moment before looking up to me again. I'm ready. I want this done, and I want to go home. You're sure about that? No one is rushing you, Bella, I replied, brushing her hair back from her face. I need to get out of here, and I want this over with and behind me. Please just go get them, she said between clenched teeth, her breaths coming more quickly. All right, I'll go tell them, I reassured her softly, kissing her forehead. Edward, she murmured before I could pull away, and I looked down at her nervous gaze. Stay with me? I can't do this alone. Brushing my lips against her wrist, I nodded. I'll be right here, I promise. Bella relaxed back into the bed as I moved away and walked out of the room, meeting her father and Rose just outside the door. Their questioning gazes bore into me as they waited for me to speak, and I swallowed hard when I met their eyes, knowing what the following words would mean. She says she's ready. Just as dawn broke, the police arrived again to talk to Bella. I sat and listened to her recount every excruciating detail that she could remember of her attack and the time leading up to it. With every word and tear, my heart broke for her, and even more so when I felt her hand tightening around mine. Bella had woken early the morning before, and decided to go out for a walk to clear her head. She was still upset about the events in Chicago, while never divulging to them the personal details of it beyond that we had an argument. She was a block away from her apartment building when someone grabbed her from behind and pulled her into a dark alley. Her cries increased when they asked her to describe her attacker, and she shook her head, her hand tightening on mine. I don't know. Whenever I tried to look at him, he'd hit me. He had dark hair, denim jacket, smelled like cigarettes and some kind of alcohol. Deep voice, very deep voice. Said he was going to kill me if I didn't stop screaming. But I couldn't. Everything hurt so bad. I can't remember anything else, I swear. I sat beside her on the bed and slid my arm around her shoulders, trying to remain strong for her, as her face rested against my chest with painful sobs consuming her again. I think we're done here. Mr. Cullen, a word? One of the officers spoke to me, his gaze serious as he nodded toward the door. Bella looked up at me abruptly and shook her head, her eyes wide as she held onto my arm with her good hand. No. I'll be right back, I whispered against her hair, and she secured her hold. I'll send Rose or your dad in, but I'll be back before you know it. I stood and followed the officers out of the room, where an unfamiliar voice and face met me. Whoa, who's this? The petite woman froze as she gazed at me when I stepped out the door, then looked between Rose and Bella's father. What is going on here? Bella's in the hospital, Rose is married, and now, strange men are stepping out of Bella's room? It's Bella's boyfriend Edward, which you would know if you bothered answering your phone or responding to voicemails, or I don't know, letting us know that you're even alive over the last few months. Rose seethed bitterly, her glare cutting into the small woman, who I could only deduct was the infamous Alice. Ladies, Charlie spoke up, placing a hand on each of their shoulders, and shook his head. It's not the time or place for this. Can someone go in and sit with Bella for a few minutes? She really doesn't want to be alone, I said, looking between them all. I'll go. The last thing she needs is to be upset more, Rose replied, backing toward Emmett and taking his hand while never taking her eyes off Alice. As they disappeared into Bella's room, the young woman turned to me with a sad gaze and offered me a weak smile. "I'm Alice. I came as soon as I could. I was in Texas." "What's going on with Bella, Edward?" I replied with a brief nod and then turned my attention back to the officers. They exchanged a glace, drawing in deep breaths before leading us all down the hall to the vacant waiting room, where one of them hesitantly began to speak. "I wish we could say that we believed that this was an isolated incident, but we don't think that's the case. We've been seeing an increasing number of these attacks in the past few weeks, although this is the first one that's happened off campus that we know of. Just this last week, we've had 3 reports of attacks strikingly similar to Miss Swan's," the officer explained, pausing as he sat down across from us and leaned forward on his elbows. "We believe it would be in her best interest if she did not go back to her apartment for a while. From what we've been able to conclude, the perpetrator doesn't give up after a failed attack. He returns to the scene, and now 2 of those 3 girls have become homicides." Charlie's face blanched as his hands gripped the arms of the chair in which he sat, vehemently shaking his head until he finally stood. "No, she's coming home now. She should have never come here in the first place. She belongs in Washington with me and her mother." "And where were you?" His sudden shift in attention to me took me off guard, and I stared at him blankly. "Excuse me? You heard me. You're the big new boyfriend that she's never mentioned to me, her mother, or one of her closest friends," he began, gesturing to Alice, whose eyes lowered as he spoke. "She wouldn't talk to anyone until you got here. Where the hell were you when all this was going on?" I took a deep breath and swallowed hard, unprepared for the sudden interrogation. "I was home in Chicago, sir." "I beg your pardon?" Charlie replied, his brow rising and his eyes widening. I took a deep breath and ran my hand through my hair until the officer began to speak again. "I hate to interrupt, but she will be discharged soon, so arrangements will need to be made fairly quickly. She'll be on a flight this afternoon," Charlie said abruptly, grabbing his phone out of his pocket and storming out of the room, mumbling under his breath the whole way out. Bella was not entirely thrilled by the prospect of going back to Washington, nor did Emmett feel comfortable with his wife remaining in dorm housing after the information we'd acquired. He remained in law with her while I accompanied Bella to Seattle, much to the discontent of her father. His eyes never left me as he sat across the aisle with her, positioned between us and blocking my view of her. When we arrived at the Swan residence, I remained in the front room while Charlie carried Bella upstairs to her bedroom. The soft, indiscernible mumblings from above caused me to fidget until the light-haired woman who'd greeted us upon our arrival came back down the stairs and walked toward me. "You must be the Edward I'm hearing so much about," she said with a small smile, her eyes gesturing toward the ceiling in the direction of the voices. "I'm Bella's mother, Renee. You'll need to forgive my husband. I don't think she's ever grown past 10 years old in his eyes." Her hand gently rested on my arm for a moment before moving past me, gesturing for me to follow her into the kitchen. As I passed through the doorway, I found her already flitting about the room, setting mugs on the table. "It's a shame we haven't met you before this. You know Bella, always so busy." Although attempting to keep her voice light, the hint of tears was evident in her eyes as she poured the boiling water from the kettle into the mugs. Voices began to rise above us, and we both looked up, unable to make out what was being said, but Bella's gradually got louder. "She hates forks, you know. That's why she went. This place was too small for her," Renee said, giving me a sad smile and shaking her head. "She's always been too much like me in that way, I guess. But I have Charlie here, something to stay for. I didn't want the same thing for her. Her dreams were too big to ever be happy here. So I encouraged her to go, and now, look what's happened." Her hand rose to cover her mouth as she lowered into the chair, suppressing the sob that was threatening to escape. I was speechless. I didn't know what to say, as I so rarely did to a crying woman. So I uttered the first thing that came to mind. "I'm sure Bella would have gone anyway. She's pretty determined like that." Renee's eyes met mine, and she released a sad laugh as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Yes, she really is, isn't she?" Charlie appeared in the doorway, and our gazes moved over to him. His entire body was tense as he finally looked at me, folding his arms over his chest. "She's asking for you." I inhaled deeply as I stood and approached the doorway, her father holding his position there and preventing me from passing. "You and I are gonna talk later," he said seriously, his eyes boring into mine until he finally stepped aside to let me through. I made my way up the stairs to the open bedroom door, revealing Bella propped up with pillows on her bed, and tears trailing down her cheeks. "Not exactly the way I envisioned you meeting my father." Her voice caught me by surprise, as she never looked up. I slowly walked across the room and stood beside her bed, her eyes finally rising and motioning for me to sit down. "Yeah, I guess it could have definitely been under better circumstances. In more ways than one," she mumbled as I lowered to sit at her feet, my gaze remaining on the floor. "Why did you really come, Edward? Why did it take this?" I sighed heavily and shook my head before looking over to her. "I didn't ever want you to leave, but you needed to think and you wanted space." "I wanted you," she replied, and her tear-filled eyes rose to meet mine. "But that wasn't enough. You didn't want anything more than what we already had." And Rose was right. It may work for now, with me in school and your job, but how long can that be enough? I leaned forward with my elbows on my knees, pressing my fingers to my lips. "I'm scared, Bella. Everything has been so amazing and perfect with you. I didn't want to lose that, or you." Bella was quiet for several moments, and then I felt the mattress beneath me move. I glanced over to her quickly to find her shifting to sit up more, and I moved to help her. But she shook her head and braced her ribs with her arm. She exhaled slowly as she rested back against the pillow, with soft grunts, as the pain began to ebb slightly. "I don't see how being closer would ruin anything. Isn't that the normal progression of a relationship between two people who love each other?" "I don't know," I replied, shaking my head. "I've told you about my past luck with relationships, Bella. But that was them, Edward, not me." She cut me off with her teeth clenched. "It was also me. More so than them," I replied, dragging my sweaty palms along my thighs. "I've only told you a fraction of what happened with Tanya. You'd see me a whole lot differently if you knew it all." Bella stiffened at the mention of Tanya's name, as she always did in the rare occasions she came up in conversation, unwilling to look me in the eyes. "She left you because of the hospital, I get it. But what does that have to do with me?" "More than you know," I murmured, shaking my head. "There's more to it than that. A year earlier, I walked through the door of the apartment after what felt like the longest 2 weeks of my life. After losing Dr. Keegan from the staff the previous month, I had volunteered to pick up a few extra shifts, and all I really wanted to do was get off my feet and sleep. However, the apartment was unnaturally still for 6 o'clock at night. All the lights were off and Tanya was nowhere in sight. I shrugged it off for the time being, assuming that she had just gone out with Kate again, and made my way to the bedroom and collapsed into my pillow. I woke at 9 the next morning, surprised that I'd slept so long, but also that I hadn't heard Tanya come home during the night. Turning my head on the pillow, my eyes met the still-made, vacant bed beside me, and I sat up slowly, my eyes adjusting to the light. "Tanya," I called out to the empty room and tossed the covers to the side, rising from bed and walking out into the living room. Nothing stirred and the couch was vacant, as was the kitchen. I grabbed my coat from the back of the couch and reached into the pocket for my phone. No calls, no texts. I dialed her phone and it went straight to voicemail. My heart began pounding as thoughts of something happening to her ran through my mind. "Hey, you didn't come home last night. Are you okay?" I sent off the text and began a pot of coffee, barely sitting down at the table when my phone buzzed in my hand. "I'm fine, but I'm not coming home. I don't live there anymore." My brow furrowed and my eyes widened as I read her words, and then looked up to gaze around the apartment. Every trace of Tanya was gone. Every picture, every CD, and even that god-awful quilt from the back of the couch that she loved so much, all gone. "When were you planning on telling me that you were leaving?" I typed out the text with a clenched jaw, anger filling me that she'd left with no warning, no discussion, at the first possible opening, leaving me completely in the dark. My phone vibrated again on the table with an incoming call. It was Tanya. Part of me didn't want to answer, not wanting to hear what she had to say. Yet, another part knew that it was inevitable that I talk to her. I answered and held it up to my ear, but words wouldn't come to me except one. "Why? You don't need me, Edward," she spoke softly in reply. "And a relationship can't work when there's only one person in it." "Tanya, we talked about this." "No, we haven't." She cut me off, her voice a little more forceful. "We never talk. That would actually involve a conversation consisting of more than I gotta go. The only relationship you put any effort into is the one you have with the hospital. You barely even notice me anymore." "That's not true. I notice you. I called this morning, didn't I?" "After how long?" she asked with a sad sigh. "I've been gone for 2 weeks, Edward. 2 weeks, and you're only just now noticing." My breath froze in my throat as I stood and made my way back into the bedroom, whipping open the closet door to find her side completely bare. How many times had I come in here to change and hadn't seen this? Our bathroom was missing her hairbrush, her towel, her toothpaste and toothbrush, and the tiny perfume bottles along the mirror. I sank down onto the end of the bed in shock. Looking back over the last couple of weeks, I realized that she was right. I hadn't noticed that she wasn't there when evidence of it was all around me and should have smacked me right in the face. There's no room for me in your life. I can't compare to all that. Maybe someday, some woman will, but it's not me. I want a companion, not an occasional roommate, she said in a soft, sorrowful tone. I want to get married and have a family, and as much as I would love to have that with you, I just don't see it happening. I know you don't love me like that, Edward. I stared at my hands as Bella gazed at me silently, unable to continue past that point. It was the part of me I never wanted her to see, the part that would effectively destroy her image of me. She drew in a slow, deep breath after an extended moment of silence, tucking her hair behind her ear. So that's why you got into this online thing with me? It was safe as long as I was thousands of miles away from you. What? I gasped with widened eyes and gazing at her in disbelief, watching her eyes lower to the comforter covering her legs and shaking my head. Bella, no, that's not what I'm trying to say. But it is, because it's very obvious that you did love her, if it's still affecting your life a year later, she replied with her bruised lip trembling with restrained cries, and I slid up the bed and took her hand. No, I didn't, I said in a calmer tone, and her eyes rose to mine. I wanted to argue with her and tell her that I did, but I couldn't. We were together for 2 years, living in the same apartment for 6 months, and I couldn't even tell her that I loved her. Her brow furrowed in confusion and her head shook as she stared down at our joined hands. You've completely lost me. I'm not following you at all. Bella, I whispered softly, sliding off the bed to kneel on the floor beside her and cupped her hand between my own. I was so wrapped up in my own world and at the hospital that someone who should have meant the world to me didn't, and when she left, I didn't even notice. For 2 weeks, I guess part of me was even waiting for it to happen. I just never thought she'd do it. I was floored when I realized that she wasn't coming back, but even more so when it hit me that I was okay with that. Bella looked to me again and swallowed hard, her fingers twitching slightly between my hands. So, you think you'll figure out that you don't really love me? I pinched my eyes closed and secured my hold on her hand, raising it to my lips and pressing them to the backs of her fingers. If I lost you like that, if you decided that you couldn't handle life with me, I think I'd lose my mind, I replied in a strained voice, a lump rising in my throat and my brow tightening. I didn't love her, but I do love you, so damn much, and losing you like that would kill me. So you push me away instead? Her voice was hardened slightly, and I felt the pit of my stomach drop, but she never pulled away from me. What ifs will kill a relationship faster than any profession, Edward. I nodded and looked back to her. I know. I'm just really afraid of losing the first thing that's truly mattered to me aside from my career. Because I can't change who I am. That's who I fell in love with. If you change that, part of the man I love would disappear, she replied, her features softening slightly as her thumb ran along my hand. I'm not that insecure that I need you with me around the clock to reassure me that you love me. The way you looked at me when I got called to the hospital the other night, and when I came home to the dark apartment, I sighed as my voice trailed off, shaking my head. I won't tell you that I wasn't disappointed, but not just because you left, she said, her grip tightening on me. You'd been pushing me away for days, and I couldn't figure out what I'd done. And it just didn't seem like you were all that upset about leaving me, and on your vacation, no less. That hurt more than anything. I'm not going to ask your forgiveness for that. There is no excuse for it, I replied, lowering my gaze and running my fingers along the back of her hand. But I am sorry I hurt you, more than I can tell you. Edward, come here. She spoke so softly that I barely heard her, feeling her gently tug my hand toward her. I rose and sat back down beside her on the bed and listened as she inhaled a deep breath. I'm still upset with you. I've never been so hurt, confused, completely humiliated in my entire life as I have been in the last few days, but my eyes lifted to gaze at her, and fresh tears lined her bruised cheek. I reached up to gently brush them away with my thumb, and her lips immediately pressed to my palm. That doesn't mean that I don't still love you, she whispered and looked up at me. I just can't live in the shadow of every woman who's come before me. You need to have faith in me before anything can work between us. If you can't do that, then it's best if you just went back to Chicago and let me get over you and move on with my life, because I can't live like this. My chest tightened painfully at her statement, and I found it impossible to swallow. I couldn't fault her for saying it, but the thought of life without her was the sole reason for everything we'd been through in the last few days, and it terrified me that this could be the end. Would it be that easy for you to get over me? I sighed heavily, gazing at our hands that joined beside my hip. So much had happened over the last several days, I could still feel my head spinning from it. I honestly thought it couldn't possibly get worse than that plane ride back from Chicago, filled with uncertainty and pain at losing the Edward I had come to love so much. I began wondering if that man was even real, or if I had simply built him up that way in my mind from the very first online conversation we had. However, the instant I was grabbed and pulled into that dark alley, he was all I could think about. I screamed with everything in me, almost feeling as if I were in one of those nightmares, that, no matter how afraid you are or how hard you try, your voice won't work, and you just can't scream loud enough. Memories I'd been trying to push back began flashing through my mind in blinding succession, as I kicked, punched and cried through every moment of my attack, until he finally ran away. Edward's eyes and his smile, the way he would lick his lips just moments before pressing them to mine, the feel of his arms around me and the soft kisses along my neck that had woken me only days before. Then the look on his face when I told him that I was leaving, and the fact that I never told him that I loved him before I walked away. And in the most terrifying event of my life, it was that fact that gave me the strength to fight, to scream as loud as I could, manage to draw as much attention to myself as possible. Through the pain and fear, nothing was stronger than my desire to see Edward again, even if I wasn't enough for him. However, when he appeared at my bedside in the hospital, I was honestly surprised to see him. Despite my insistence for him before I would willingly let anyone else near me, I hadn't permitted myself to believe that he'd actually come. And once I allowed myself to gaze into his eyes, finding all the guilt and fear resting there, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd made a mistake in asking for him. I didn't want him there with me because of my attack, or because he was afraid or felt responsible for what happened. I wanted to feel the safety that I only experienced with him, to know that he still loved me, and why things had happened the way they did. Listening to him talk about what happened with Tanya was painful, watching the crease in his forehead deepen as he told me about the day he realized she'd left and how it affected him. I had fooled myself into thinking that there hadn't been any feelings left there. But the look in his eyes made me wonder how wrong I'd been. It broke my heart to think that I'd fallen hopelessly in love with a man who was still trapped in the past with another woman who had broken his. Even after he adamantly denied that he loved her, impassionately insisting that it was his fear of losing me that made him behave that way, I still couldn't forget how much his actions had hurt me. That all I'd wanted was for him to hold me and tell me he loved me, and instead, he'd pushed me away with his fears and baseless assumptions. Edward, come here. I gently tugged his hand for him to sit beside me on the bed, and he rose to do so, but wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked to where his fingers still wrapped around mine and drew in a deep breath. I'm still upset with you. I've never been so hurt, confused, completely humiliated in my entire life as I have been in the last few days, but I hadn't realized that I was crying until I felt his hand come to my cheek, gathering the moisture there with his thumb. A simple, intimate gesture that it felt as if I'd been waiting an eternity for. And I drowned myself in it for a moment. It wasn't a touch of fear or guilt, but of affection. Everything I wanted from my Edward. I pressed my lips to his palm and took a slow breath. That doesn't mean that I don't still love you, I murmured against his skin, and brought my eyes back to his. I nearly lost myself in the surprise and relief in his gaze, but managed to collect my thoughts enough to continue. I just can't live in the shadow of every woman who's come before me. You need to have faith in me before anything can work between us. If you can't do that, then it's best if you just went back to Chicago and let me get over you and move on with my life, because I can't live like this. His breaths halted at my statement, and his hand fell from my face. He appeared completely crestfallen, and his eyes grew painfully sad, as dozens of emotions passed behind them at once. Would it be that easy for you to get over me? My heart ached at his tone, as well as the shift in his features. His voice cracked as he spoke, and the crease reappeared on his forehead, as if my words had caused him physical pain. His thumb resumed its motion on the hand still resting in his, and I watched his gaze lower to it as well. I knew that look. I had seen it before when I'd walked away from him at the airport in Chicago. How badly he'd wanted me to stay, but let me go because it was what I had wanted. I could see that if I told him yes, he'd walk away without question, regardless of what he wanted. However, the thought of that happening and my life returning to the way it was before he entered it was even more painful to endure. It felt like a dagger, driving straight through my heart, and I closed my eyes against the welling tears. Of course it wouldn't be easy, but neither has the last few days, and I am not going to spend my life waiting around for the next thing that freaks you out. I want a relationship, not a waiting game of walking around on eggshells with you. That's not any kind of life for anyone. That's the last thing I want, Bella, Edward replied, his brow tightening further and eyes focused on our hands. You'll have to be a little more specific than that, I said, attempting to keep my breath slow and my gaze on him. I don't want to put you through that, he spoke in a soft voice, finally looking up to me. I don't want to be the guy that has you waiting for him to break your heart. Well, the only way to accomplish that is to not be him, I replied, my fingers tracing lightly on his palm. He drew in a deep breath and nodded, clearing his throat as his hand tightened its hold lightly. I don't want to lose you, Edward. I have been happier with you than I've been in my entire life. But I need you to be in this as much as I am. I don't want to lose you either, he said, his forehead pulling together, and the pained crease returned to his features as his hand gently cupped my jaw. I really do love you. My eyes closed and my smile stretched across my lips, tugging painfully at the split in the corner, but that didn't matter. I pulled him closer until his forehead rested against mine, bringing my fingers to run over his cheek. That's all I've wanted to hear for days. What? He whispered, and I opened my eyes to look up at him again. That you love me, and not because I'm walking away or because I'm hurt. Just because, I replied with a soft chuckle, but a tear escaped the corner of my eye. Of course, I love you, Bella. I love you so damn much, he said breathlessly, his voice cracking slightly as he spoke. Tilting my chin gently, he pressed his lips softly to mine, and my fingers weaved into his hair, holding him against me. The ache I felt throughout my body at the movement held nothing on the one I had felt since Vegas. Wanting to feel him against me, the tension between us gradually dissipating. To have my Edward back. His thumb grazed lightly over my cheek, causing me to wince slightly as it brushed over the bruise, and he began to pull back. I shook my head, lightly gripping his hair to hold him close to me. Don't. But it's hurting you. It's worth it, I interrupted him, pulling him back against my lips. You have no idea how much I've missed this, missed you. His kiss remained gentle, but there was no doubting the emotion behind it. I allowed myself to soak in every aspect of the moment. The softness of his lips, every strand of his hair between my fingers, the scent of him surrounding me. Every single thing I'd missed so much. I slid my arm around his shoulders to pull him closer to me, and while hesitant to place his weight on me, he draped his body along my side. He continued brushing soft kisses against my lips, while his eyes moved over my face. I knew I had to have looked like hell, with all the cuts and bruises that even had me avoiding a mirror. Yet, he still gazed at me with such adoration, touching me gently but still touching me. After what had happened, I wasn't sure how he would react if we ever returned to that point. Would he still see me the same way? Or would the fact that another man's hands had been on me, while not in an intimate way, change his view of me? Would he still want me, or see me only as an obligation? I saw none of that in his eyes. Through all the pain I saw there, with every wince and gasp I would utter whenever I would try to move, I still saw my Edward in every ounce of love he had for me. I pressed my lips against his again until the abrupt clearing of a throat in the hallway interrupted us, and I turned my gaze toward it. There I found my father, glaring sternly at Edward before continuing down the hall to his room, and closing the door more roughly than necessary. Edward chuckled nervously as his forehead pressed against mine before sitting up. I guess that's my cue to get my ass back downstairs. My eyes widened and I reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. No, I don't want you to go. Please, don't leave me alone here. The fear of the images that had been haunting me every time I closed my eyes shook me to my core. Dark hair and denim jacket, his fist coming toward me. I could still feel and hear everything about that morning in my head, still smell the pungent combination of cigarettes and alcohol, and I couldn't shake it, not yet. I felt Edward's lips press against my forehead and then rest on my hair. SHH. Relax, baby. I won't leave if you don't want me to. Don't think your father will be too happy about that. I'll deal with my father in the morning. It's not like we can really do anything that he would object to, I said with a weak smile, attempting to shift on the bed to make room for him, the accompanying sharp intake of breath emphasizing my point. I think my mere presence here would be objectionable, he replied with an uncomfortable chuckle as he kicked off his shoes and then carefully lay down beside me. I slowly lifted my head for him to slide his arm beneath it, and then lowered it back down on his shoulder. I felt his cheek resting against the top of my head, and his fingers tracing lightly through my hair, and every muscle in my body began to loosen and relax. My eyes grew heavy as the exhaustion of the previous few days caught up with me, and finally closed. I don't care. I continued to breathe him in, trailing the backs of my fingers over his chest. I didn't want the moment to end, to fall asleep and take the chance of waking up to everything as it was even just that morning, to have him pull away from me again. Get some sleep, Bella. No, I replied with a slight smirk, to which he chuckled softly. How can I possibly sleep when we still have so much to talk about? There's plenty of time to discuss the future, I heard him whisper into my hair, and I lifted my eyes to look at him. There is? I asked tentatively. Definitely, he replied, gently smoothing my hair back from my face. Bella, there is no future for me without you in it. Isabella Marie Swan, what is going on with you? My father's voice carried through the kitchen the following morning, his arms waving out on either side of him. I sat silently at the table with my eyes lowered, my fingers picking at the black brace around my wrist. This isn't like you, young lady. Who is this guy and why haven't you so much as mentioned him to us? Because I didn't want this. The interrogation at the first mention that I had a boyfriend, I stated pointedly as I looked up to my father's reddened face, thankful that Edward was out in the living room with my mother. My dad could be quite intimidating when he was angry, and there was no doubt in my mind of how upset he was. Edward's a great guy. He's a doctor. From Chicago. What the hell are you thinking, Bella? He yelled with his fingers pressed to his forehead. Not to mention way too old for you. He's 28. That's not that much older than a 28-year-old doctor from halfway across the country? This makes no sense. What, aren't there boys your own age in law? And you're down there to study, not date. Dad, my grades are good, I'm keeping up with all my classes, and I'm not running around campus, partying it up and getting drunk, or sleeping around with a bunch of guys. I just started talking to Edward online one night, and, stop right there, online? You met this boy online? My father replied with widened eyes, his shoulders tensing as he clenched his fists. This is done, young lady. Right now. My daughter is not going to have some sick, twisted internet thing. No, it's not. And by the way, I'm fine, Dad. A little achy and sore, a little scared shitless by everything that's happened, but I'm fine. Thanks for asking. I snapped with angry tears in my eyes, rising up from my seat slowly and standing in front of him. You can't keep doing this. I have tried all my life to do everything you wanted me to be a good kid and get good grades, and make you proud of me. But damn it, I'm not a little kid anymore. I'm 22 years old, about to graduate from college, and I think it's time for you to start letting me live my own life. And I'm not going to let you destroy the best thing that's ever happened to me. I love him, Dad. My father stood dumbfounded at my outburst, rendered speechless for the first time in as long as I could remember. My throat burned slightly from yelling against the restrained cries in my chest, and I watched as his hands slid into his front pockets and his head lowered. I just don't want to see you hurt, Bella. He lives in Chicago. What kind of future can you have? None, I replied in a softer tone, and his eyes rose to mine, and I shook my head. As long as I stay this far away from him, I'm not moving back to Washington, Dad. He slowly lowered into the kitchen chair with a look of disbelief, never taking his eyes off me. His chest rose and fell dramatically, and his hand rose to rest over his heart. Dad, I said worriedly, stepping toward him to rest my hand on his shoulder. My mother and Edward both appeared in the doorway a moment later, and my father shook his head. I'm fine. Just he paused, his fingers resting gently on my hand and closing around it. You're not coming home? My eyes rose to meet Edward's, which were giving me just as questioning of a gaze. No, I'm not, I replied shakily and felt my father's hand grip mine more firmly. I've been starting to look into internships with graduation so close. I found several in law, but I have nothing to hold me there with Rose moving with them, and Alice dropping out and moving to Texas with Jasper. There's some in Seattle, but I need to go where my heart lies, so I've been looking into a few in Chicago. My breath stalled in my throat as I watched Edward's eyes widen. I'd been unsure of how to approach the topic with him, since we'd never really discussed any kind of firm future. Afraid that he would feel that it was all too sudden. But in the end, it had to be my decision. "You're going to Chicago?" my father asked in a strained voice, his gaze moving to Edward. "It's nothing set in stone yet. I haven't accepted anything, and I still have some things to figure out," I said with my eyes lowered, centering myself before looking back up to face him. "But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what I'm going to be doing after I go back to law to finish my degree." My father looked up to me and began shaking his head. "Baby, you can't go back there. It's far too dangerous for you." "Bella, he's right. Law is not a good place for you to be right now. There has to be another way for you to finish your degree," Edward said, stepping further into the kitchen toward me. "I'm not going to live in fear and hide away so that this guy wins. I can't let him have that power over me," I replied, my eyes moving back and forth between them. "I have less than 3 months left, and I haven't worked this hard for this long to have him take that away from me. I want to finish out this semester and walk across that stage to get the degree I've busted my ass for." My father and Edward shared an unnerving glance, both speaking volumes with their eyes. Their mutual worry and fear was evident in their postures, and while I knew it was more than warranted, my determination was stronger. "I'm well aware of the dangers, but I need to do this." My eyes remained on my dad, watching his shoulders fall in defeat, and he shook his head. He startled me by standing abruptly and stalking across the kitchen, his hand dragging slowly along his mustache and the corners of his mouth, before resting on the back of his neck. "Bella, if something ever happened to you again, it would kill me. And this sick bastard could take you away from me and your mother." He paused, his gaze moving across the room to the man at my side, and he swallowed hard. "And Edward." His voice was tight and strained, and his jaw clenched as he spoke the words, but the emotion written in his eyes was something I'd never seen. My dad had never been one for displaying an abundance of affection, but one thing I'd never doubted was that in his extreme, overprotective way, he loved me more than anything in the world. And I knew that coming to terms with his little girl growing up and staring in the face of the man with whom he had to share her heart, was difficult for him. As I began to stand shakily, I felt Edward's hand on my elbow, and I looked to him, shaking my head. "I'm fine," I said softly, and then walked over to my father. "Dad, you don't have to worry. I'm a cop's daughter, and you taught me how to protect myself. I'll carry mace, even take self-defense classes if I have to. Once I'm healed, obviously." My dad wrapped his arms around me gently, kissing my forehead as his hand rested on my hair. "Extra deadbolt on your door." I sighed and nodded, relaxing into his embrace and resting my head on his shoulder. "Yes, Dad." "And windows closed and locked at night," he continued. "I'm on the 2nd floor," I began to protest, but his eyes locked on my face firmly. "Windows closed and locked, I promise. And please call us at night to let us know you're okay. Call collect, if you have to." "I will," I whispered with a fistful of his flannel shirt in my hand, inhaling the familiar scent of aftershave beer, and just uniquely Dad. I felt his chin brush against my forehead as his head rose, looking across the room to Edward. "I'm going down to the station to grab some pepper spray. I think it might be a good opportunity for you and I to have that little talk." His arms fell from around me, and I glanced over to Edward, watching his Adam's apple dip and rise slowly as he swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, sir." Edward's voice shook slightly as he spoke, and he appeared truly intimidated as he followed my father out of the kitchen. He turned his head to look back at me one more time, and I gave him the best smile I could manage, before he stepped out the door with my dad right behind him. The several hours following their departure were nerve-wracking. Even with the consistent reassurances from my mother that everything would be fine, I couldn't help but worry. I was finally getting a handle on my life, and the Edward the First love back. The last thing I needed was for my father sweeping in and messing it up. My worries only increased about an hour after they left, when I received a phone call from Edward. I thought the interrogation rooms in the movies were just Hollywood hype. "The two-way mirror is intimidating," he whispered softly, and I groaned, covering my eyes with my hand. "Do you think he's watching me? I'm gonna kill him. I swear to God," I seethed, looking at my mother, who just rolled her eyes, as if she instinctively knew what my father was up to. She always swore that he was a teddy bear with a grisly exterior, but to me, it felt as if my words had fallen on deaf ears in the kitchen earlier. I needed to be allowed to grow up, to take control of my life, and make my own decisions, and that included who I decided to date. "Oh shit, he's coming back with the coffee. I gotta go. Love you, baby." I growled loudly as the line went dead, grasping my phone tightly in my hand, with my jaw clenched slightly. Dad! My mother continued in her attempts at soothing me for the next 3 hours until we heard the crunching of gravel beneath the tires of my dad's cruiser and the silencing of the engine. My father calmly walked into the house and through the kitchen, grabbing himself a beer from the fridge. Dad, where's Edward? I asked firmly as he leaned against the counter, taking a sip from the can, as if he didn't have a single care in the world. Oh, he's coming, relax, my dad replied after a moment. Seriously, is he always that uptight? What did you do? I hissed quietly before Edward finally made his way into the kitchen, his face pale, and giving me a timid smile. Remember, Edward, what happens at the station, stays at the station. My dad had a gleam in his eyes that was completely foreign, and then he turned his gaze to me with a smile and winked. That must have been some talk. Throughout the entire flight back to law, I was mentally cursing my father. Every attempt I made at conversation with Edward, he met with a small smile and brief answers, not quite the withdrawn man from days before, but very cautious about where and how much he touched me, as well as what he said. So much had transpired in just a couple of days. Rose and Emmett, my first real fight with Edward, my attack, finally discovering what had become of Alice, picking away through Edward's thick exterior, just so much for such a short period of time. Alice had promised to call to explain more about why she had taken off so suddenly to Texas with a man that she barely knew once I'd healed, but I knew that both she and Rose were okay, there was nothing to worry about urgently. My only concern at that particular moment was the once again silent man at my side. Once we arrived back at my apartment and I settled onto my couch as comfortably as I could, I reached out for Edward's hand and gently tugged him down to sit beside me. Okay, I have no idea what my father said to you, but right now, I am imagining the worst. And he was grinning like the cat who caught the canary, while you looked like you'd seen a ghost. So, the hell with his what happens at the station, stays at the station bullshit, and tell me what he said to make you act this way. It was nothing, he replied with a slight chuckle, that same irritating attempt at a smile gracing his lips again and really pissing me off. I sighed and gave him an intent glare, and he released his hold. His body leaned forward, and he folded his hands in front of him, his gaze resting on the coffee table. The Chicago thing really threw him Bella, as it did me. God, we're not going back there again, are we? I groaned, resting my head gently on the back of the couch. I thought you wanted this. Edward glanced over at me as I gestured my hand between the two of us, and he quickly shook his head, turning his body to face me, and tracing his fingers over my hair. I do, baby, that's not what I mean. I just had no idea that you were even considering it, and I don't think your father believed that for a second. Flashback in Edward Pov. As I walked past Chief Swan and out the door, I felt the trepidation building in my gut. I heard his footsteps following mine and the jingling of his keys, and my heart began to race, my forehead beaded with sweat. Bella's father had not gotten the best first impression of me, and the thought of being alone in a police station with actual holding cells with my girlfriend's father, the police chief, I didn't mind saying that made me more than a little nervous. I just have to clear some of my stuff out of the front seat, unless you don't mind riding in the back. He started with a straight face, and as I struggled for a response, he shook his head and laughed. This was going to be a long afternoon. Once he gathered the papers from the passenger seat into a pile and moved them to the middle, I lowered myself into the car beside him. Silence filled the small, confined space, and I kept my gaze out the side window. If he was trying to intimidate me, it was working very well. When the small diner that I was certain we'd pass 3 times before flashed by us again, it became obvious that he was stalling, dragging this out as long as he possibly could. There was no way that he was having trouble finding the police station that he went to every day, in such a small town where he'd spent his entire life. He kept shooting me occasional glances as if expecting me to say something, but nothing would come to me. His reaction to how we'd met the appropriate for parental ears version was not exactly encouraging. What else could I possibly add to that? Your daughter is so much better in person, sir. That didn't even sound right to my ears. After driving for what felt like an eternity, we pulled up to the small station, and my stomach suddenly felt as if it were in my throat. The chief wordlessly exited the car and began walking toward the entrance, and I slowly followed suit, my nervousness reaching new limits. This had to be the worst nightmare of any man. Even the small building in front of me appeared 10 stories tall and intimidating as hell. Why don't you just wait in there? "I'll only be a few minutes," he said casually, pointing toward the open room beside him as he passed. I halted in my steps when I reached the doorway and swallowed hard. It was an interrogation room, with the long rectangular table and uncomfortable-looking chairs, even the mirror along the wall, everything I'd ever seen in those reruns of Law and Order and cheesy crime movies. "Oh fuck," I thought to myself as I hesitantly stepped into the room and sat down, feeling very much like I was going to be sick. All I needed at that point were the investigators in dress shirts and ugly ties, carrying the styrofoam cups of coffee. Pulling my phone out of my pocket, I quickly dialed Bella, needing her now more than ever. She answered on the first ring, and her voice was slightly frantic, which did nothing to reassure me. If she was nervous, I could only imagine what I was in for. I thought the interrogation rooms in the movies were just Hollywood hype. "The two-way mirror is intimidating," I whispered into the phone, attempting to keep the conversation private with my eyes never leaving the wall in front of me. "Do you think he's watching me? I'm gonna kill him. I swear to God," she practically growled into the phone. "Well, irritation is better than fear," I thought. Looking up as movement caught the corner of my eye, I spotted her father walking down the hall with 2 styrofoam cups. "Oh shit, he's coming back with the coffee. I gotta go. Love you, baby." I abruptly ended the call and shoved my phone back into my pocket, sitting up a little straighter and attempting to appear far more confident than I felt. Bella's father set the cups on the table and went to close the door, snapping the blinds on the window shut. His eyes met mine as he walked back, taking the seat across from me and sliding the chair closer. "So, how long have you and Bella been together?" "Well, he certainly doesn't beat around the bush," I mused silently as I cleared my throat, trying to formulate the words to reply. "A few months, sir. And all this online business, you can understand, in my line of work, why this makes me more than a little nervous," he continued, folding his hands in front of him on the table. "Now, I'm sure you're a good guy and all, as Bella has said, but that's my little girl, my only child. I know I can't protect her forever, but the thought of her being so far away with someone she barely knows, I'd be lying if I said that sat well with me." My mind ran rampant and then fell completely blank, unable to think of a single way to explain everything to him. That, despite the distance between us, I knew more about Bella than I probably would if we'd met through normal means. The things we felt the freedom to discuss online, without the pretense or nervousness of being face to face, granted us an insight into each other that might have taken years to procure through the normal process of dating. But how to put that into words to her father? Another aspect that crossed my mind was that I wasn't sure if he knew about New York, or if he believed that our first meeting had resulted in her bolting from Chicago, hurt and devastated, and directly into the line of danger that had led us to the current situation. I felt more sweat beading on my forehead. There was no safe answer. "Sir, I understand your concerns. Bella and I have gotten to know each other pretty well over the last few months, and grown to care about each other very much. Though I had no idea that she was considering moving to Chicago right after graduation," I started, and he grunted in response, taking a sip of coffee. "So you only intended to keep this online thing going? You don't think she deserved something better than that?" The distaste in his voice was unsettling, and he glared at me sternly. I took a deep breath and shook my head, glancing down at the other cup, considering taking a drink to keep my foot from finding its way further down my throat. I quickly dismissed that thought, knowing the last thing I needed was to be even more jittery. Not at all. I'd certainly hoped that at some point we would discuss the possibility of being closer, but as of yet, we hadn't, I said, and watched him lean back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. "Is it actually something you want?" "Didn't sound like it from the way Bella described it," he replied, his lips pursing slightly in skepticism. My hand rose to the back of my neck, rubbing it nervously and squeezing my eyes shut. I was digging myself in deeper with every word I spoke. "Edward, I'm really not trying to be a hard ass," he sighed, leaning forward on the table, and I opened my eyes to find his features minutely softened while still keeping his voice firm. "I just want what's best for Bella. She has what it takes to really make something of herself, and I'd hate to see her throw it away for something that might not last." I inhaled deeply and nodded, my hands clasping tightly in front of me. "I see what you're saying. However, I would never do anything to hinder Bella from achieving anything she wanted. She's a very headstrong and determined woman, and that's one of the many things I love about her." Chief Swan pondered that thought for a moment, his thumb tapping lightly on the table. I swallowed hard and shifted uncomfortably under his scrutinizing gaze. He suddenly chuckled and shook his head, confusing me with his quickly shifting moods. I've been keeping my eye on you since you first arrived in law, more so when I learned of your association with her. The fact that you dropped everything to be there with her, despite the circumstances, says a lot. And while finding a man in bed with my daughter in the morning was not on my top 10 list of anything I ever wanted to see, I felt all the color leave my face at that moment as his eyebrow raised, and my stomach lurched into my throat. I instantly had a vision in my head of him lunging across the table and strangling me to within an inch of my life. Mentally putting myself in his shoes, I know I'd probably want to do the same. I tried to speak, but no sound would come out. "Edward, are you okay? You look like you're gonna be sick," he asked, tilting his head slightly. He was just noticing that, after sitting there for who knew how long by then, in that room that seemed to grow smaller by the second and sweating my ass off. Only then did I appear ill? I managed a brief nod before he continued. "I truly admire that you haven't left her side any more than you've absolutely had to. And I didn't bring you here to scare the shit out of you, just to talk to you man to man. That being said, however," he paused, standing up and resting his palms on the surface in front of him. "If anything happens to my daughter or you hurt her in any way out there in Chicago, we are going to have a problem. Nothing, not my badge, or even my wife, is more important to me than my little girl." "Yes, sir," I replied quickly, my heart pounding in my chest. "Belapov, he threatened you?" I exclaimed through clenched teeth, my eyes widening. "That is complete abuse of power. What the hell is wrong with him? He can't do that." As I began reaching into my pocket for my phone, completely intent on calling my father, I felt Edward's hand rest over mine. "Bella, don't." "No, next thing you know, he'll have a private investigator on your ass and background checks in progress, and..." My words silenced to a muffled grunt as his lips pressed gently to mine, his arm sliding around my shoulders. He pulled away slowly and shook his head as his fingers brushed my cheek. He was just being a dad, and even if that wasn't the case, I wouldn't be worried anyway. What is he going to find? That I had a speeding ticket 10 years ago? Then if it wasn't my father, why have you been acting so weird? I asked with an exasperated sigh. Edward's eyes held mine, and I felt his hand running slowly along my arm. "Why didn't you tell me about Chicago?" My gaze fell to his thigh, where my fingertips were tracing small circles over the coarse denim of his jeans. "I was going to. I just wanted to see it first, you know, firsthand, before I made any kind of firm decision. It's not just being closer to you that I had to consider, though it was definitely a factor. I was planning on talking to you about it in Chicago before everything." Edward nodded solemnly, and he pressed his lips to my temple. I leaned into him, wanting nothing more than to feel his arms around me at that moment. He pulled away from me long enough to shift his body and lean me back against his chest between his legs. Surprisingly, it was the most comfortable I'd been in days. I could feel his breath in my hair, smell the horrendous soap he'd had to use in forks on his skin, combined with his familiar scent lingering in his clothes. His heart beat rhythmically beneath my back, and his arms encircled my shoulders across my chest. More than anything, I felt safe. "That's why you were asking me all those questions that night in Vegas," he said softly, and I looked up at him, and he appeared as distant as he sounded. His eyes returned to me a moment later with sudden realization in them. "About still wanting you if we were closer." I closed my eyes and nodded slowly, resting my forehead against the side of his neck. "Yeah. And you still want to, despite everything?" he asked in a nervous tone, swallowing audibly. "How long are we going to continue being so elusive about it?" I sighed softly, taking his hand with mine where it rested on my shoulder. The events of Chicago were going to be a source of unease between us for quite some time to come, as well as the resulting ones in law, but only if we allowed them. Our conversations had been limited, at best, since he arrived at the hospital due to our surroundings and never truly being alone, and it was maddening. Yes, I want to go to Chicago, and I sure as hell want to get out of law as soon as I possibly can. But some things have changed. "Such as?" Edward asked, and I closed my eyes, running my hand along his arm. The trepidation in his voice was unmistakable, as if worried that I had changed my mind about us, which only made me more certain about my course of action. "I want to find my own place, still close to you, but I need to build a life for myself there as well, I replied, and I felt his lips press against my collarbone, and I looked to find his eyes squeezed shut. My hand rose to rest along his jaw, tracing my fingers along it as I kissed his forehead. We need a fresh start, Edward, to date like a regular couple. Nothing between us has ever just been normal. Not that I'm complaining, but I really think we both need that. I felt his breath finally release from his body, cupping my hand with his, where it still rested on his cheek and kissing my palm. And to see where things lead from there. Edward's eyes rose to meet mine, questions residing in their depths that only time would answer. I nodded as I laced my fingers between his, relaxing more back against him. I love you, and there's nothing I want more than to be with you. But I need to be able to stand on my own 2 feet as well, if I have any chance of surviving in Chicago were anything to happen to us. His chest deflated as if I'd just knocked the wind out of him with my words, his head falling back as our joined hands lowered to rest at our side. I know. My thumb ran along his, and I turned my face to kiss along his jaw. But I'd never give you up without a fight. Edward's head rose to look at me again, gazing at me for a moment before releasing my hand to cup my face with his. I love you. His voice was a hushed whisper, yet it lost none of its meaning. As his lips sealed gently over mine, I wanted him, aching to feel his touch and his body against me again. But as I shifted to melt into the kiss, my ribs reminded me sharply of their presence. I righted myself, struggling to breathe through the pain until it eventually subsided. I can't heal fast enough. I heard a soft chuckle in his throat as he kissed the tip of my nose and gently stroked my cheek with the backs of his fingers. We've got time, baby. But you're leaving tomorrow, I replied with a slight pout. I swear I'll make it up to you, Bella. I opened my eyes to look at him, noting the seriousness in his gaze before he rested his forehead against mine. Every single moment I've wasted, I'll make up to you, even if it takes forever. My eyes focused on my lap, trying to hold back the tears forming, as I listened to Edward's voice on his phone, requesting a cab to the airport. For all my insistence on taking him there myself, I was unable to convince him, decreasing my time with him even more. I didn't know how I was going to manage saying goodbye to him again with as emotionally taxing as the past week had been. Yet, as turbulent as it was, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. If anything, I was sure it would be something we would eventually look back on as the kick in the ass we both needed, to force us into the reality of each other as people, rather than the fantasy we'd allowed ourselves to be immersed in. But that didn't make it any easier to let him go. It'll be here in 20 minutes, his voice cut through my thoughts, and I merely nodded in response, my tears finally betraying me and slipping down my cheeks. He knelt down in front of me, his hands resting on my thighs. Baby, don't cry. We're going to see each other again very soon. I know, I replied with a sniffle and a nod, my fingers tracing along his arm, but I never lifted my eyes. I just really wish you'd let me come with you. I'd never get on that plane, he said seriously, and I finally looked at him. He pressed a gentle kiss against my lips, cradling my face between his hands as he lingered there for a few more seconds and then pulled away. And I have to work in the morning, and you have school. Real life calls. I've had more than enough real life in the past few days to last me a lifetime, I retorted in a huff, and he emitted an uncomfortable chuckle. The thought of 3 more months until I can touch you again, it's hard. I know. For me too, Edward whispered, and I sucked in a sudden breath, ignoring the twinge it caused. What? Hold on a second, I spoke in a rush, pushing him back gently and standing from the couch. I hardly registered his confused gaze as I made my way into my bedroom and knelt down in front of my suitcase. Bella, what are you doing? He asked from the doorway as I began tossing the garments inside to the floor haphazardly. Hold on, I repeated in exclamation, continuing to shuffle through the clothing until my fingers met the soft material they were searching for. Edward's gray t-shirt. He raised an eyebrow at me as I stood pressing it against his chest as I passed him on my way back out to the living room. He watched me silently as I unzipped his duffel bag and retrieved the shirt he'd worn when he arrived in law. I held it to my face and drew in a slow breath, inhaling his scent. My eyes opened to find his shoes directly in front of me, and then looked up to where he dangled the other shirt from his fingertips, with a curious expression on his face. I took it out of your bag in New York while you were in the bathroom, to sleep in when I got home, I said with a hint of embarrassment in my voice. Thought that maybe if I could smell you, I'd sleep better. And it sorta worked, until it started smelling like me instead. Stupid. I know. Not all, he replied after a moment, holding his hand out for mine. I took it and rose from the floor to stand in front of him, his arms sliding around my waist. Wish I'd thought of it myself. As a matter of fact, Edward's lips lowered to mine again, and I returned his kiss passionately, until his forehead rested against mine to catch his breath. I love you, I whispered with closed eyes, more tears welling behind them. And I love you, he replied, running his hands along my back. He attempted to step away from me, and I gripped his shoulder with my good hand, shaking my head. I have to go, baby. Just kiss me, one more time, please, I cried softly, my fingers slipping around his neck. And he didn't hesitate in responding. His lips met mine again in a slow, passionate kiss, his tongue brushing lightly against mine, before he reluctantly broke it again. We'll be together again before you know it, Bella. And then, I'm never leaving you again. I nodded and hesitantly released him, watching as he hoisted his bag onto his shoulder on his way to the door. He looked back at me one last time as he opened it, holding the t-shirt I had given back to him to his face, and the corners of his eyes wrinkled in a smile before disappearing into the hall. And my heart shattered. Edward Pov. Walking out that door tore me apart, watching the tears streaming down her face, and her lip trembling even between her teeth. Before I'd even made it down that first step, I was already fighting the urge to turn back, and I knew I'd made the right decision in going to the airport alone. As I sat in the back of the cab, my fingers manipulated the fabric in my hands, and a half-smile came to my lips. I remembered looking for that particular t-shirt when I'd returned from New York, figuring that I must have missed it and left it behind in the room. Although, I was certain I remembered packing it. The discovery that Bella had taken it from my bag while I wasn't looking to take a part of me home with her, both amused me and made her all the more endearing. When I arrived home hours later, I immediately retrieved it from the side pocket in which I'd secluded it and changed into it, surrounding myself in her scent. I was exhausted from the tumultuous week that had just transpired, and while I missed her dreadfully, I felt an odd sense of peace, like the serene calm after a storm. I had hope for the future with her again. Retrieving my phone from my pocket, I opened a blank text message and began typing. Just wanted to tell you good night and you smell really good. I pressed send and set my alarm, climbing into bed and closing my eyes, until my phone vibrated on my bedside table. I laughed out loud as I read a reply. You're lucky I know what you're talking about, or that would be kinda creepy. And you do too. Good night. Love you. Love you too. Ty Tom. Don't forget to lock up. I could almost see the roll of her eyes and hear her groan the moment I hit send, knowing how she felt that her father's request, and mine as well, was on the verge of overprotective. Nonetheless, she replied with a simple I won't. Okay, how about this one? Bella's exasperated voice came through my headset as another link to an available apartment appeared in my window. I clicked on it, noting the location, and immediately began shaking my head. No way, baby, that's way too far out and definitely not in the best of neighborhoods. I watched her through the webcam as she threw her hands up in the air and leaned back into her chair roughly. I give up. I'm never going to find anything. I'm beginning to think you're making this up just so I'll move in with you instead. The thought has crossed my mind. I teased and laughed as she narrowed her eyes at me. But I promise that's not it. I just want you safe and close to work. And to you, she replied with pursed lips, attempting to hide the hint of a smile. I had to admit, I'd initially been a little disappointed when Bella informed me before I left law that she wanted to have a place of her own in Chicago, and even felt a twinge of guilt when she explained why, but her reasoning was sound. She was starting a new life in Chicago, and she needed to make it for herself. With being fresh out of college, I understood her desire to prove to herself and her parents that she could do it on her own. We'd also be starting a new phase in our relationship, one that she seemed to be looking forward to, while still understandably nervous. Dating, dinners, movies, holding hands and kissing goodnight at the end of the evening, normalcy. As much as I knew she wanted that, it was also the aspect that scared her. Normal was where I had panicked and shut myself down from her. It was probably going to be a long road for us before she felt certain that I wasn't going to leave her. We'd even talked a bit about it over the past month and a half since we'd been apartment hunting for Bella, between nightly chats and frequent text messages during the day. She'd applied for an internship at an architecture firm only a few miles from the hospital and had been accepted, one step closer to making her move to Chicago permanent. And with that step came time for decisions, both about her apartment and us. Bella had decided to look into 6-month leases first, with the possibility to renew, as it presented her with the best options. She didn't want to be locked into a 1-year lease if things between us progressed as we hoped, and we were ready to move forward in our relationship in a shorter period of time. And on the flip side, if we weren't to that point in 6 months, she wasn't rushing to find another place to live. "Alright, this is one that I think can make us both happy," I said, copying the link into her window and tapping the enter key. "Close to work and me, and still in your price range." Bella rested her chin on her palm as she clicked the link, her eyes flickering over the screen. "I think I may have a closet bigger than that bathroom." "Bella," I groaned, rubbing my eyes with the heels of my palms. I know. I have less than 2 months to find a place before the move." Bella sighed heavily, but who could blame me for preferring the view of my gorgeous boyfriend over a dingy apartment? My brow tightened before lowering my hands to find her beautiful face framed by hers and a glint in her eyes that I hadn't seen since Vegas. Well, we hadn't gone a single evening without hearing the other's voice after that first night home from law. Talking was as far as we'd gone. With the healing time required for her body and our relationship, we'd been slowly building the intimacy and trust back up between us, while never failing to express the love we had for each other. However, electricity seemingly sparked in the air around me as I watched her tongue snake out to moisten her lower lip, and I couldn't help myself. I was instantly hard. "I've missed you, Edward," Bella whispered, resting back in her chair again, and trailing her fingers slowly down her neck. I cleared my throat and discreetly adjusted myself in my jeans as they continued between her breasts, circling the right one with her index finger over my t-shirt. "Oh fuck." I breathed out heavily, swallowing hard but unable to take my eyes off the incredibly sexy woman on my screen. "I've missed that too," she said with a soft giggle, and I raised my eyebrow at her. If she noticed my facial expression, she disguised it well as she took on an airy tone. "You know, I was doing a little bit of packing today, since it's never too early to start, and I came across a drawer full of some pretty interesting things." "Oh really?" I replied, thoroughly confused by her change of topic. Bella hummed softly with a nod, a mischievous smirk reappearing on her face. "From a certain shopping trip with Rose." A surge rushed through my body with her words and her shift in tone. Images flashed through my mind with the results of the last shopping trip with Rose she'd mentioned to me. The stripper pole, her striptease and that chair. I thought about just packing them away, but that would be such a waste. She spoke in a sultry tone as she lifted a black lace bra in front of the camera, followed by the matching thong panties. Garment after garment passed over my screen in a variety of fabrics and colors. Blue satin, lavender lace, white sheer, all of which I could envision on her beautiful body, and I released a groan as my cock pressed against the front of my jeans. It really was a tough decision as to what I should actually wear tonight. "Interested? You have no idea, baby," I groaned, inciting a smile from her as she stood, her fingers loosening the ties of her pants. As she began lowering them over her slender hips, I caught the hint of a black strap before the t-shirt fell to cover it. "Not fair." "Patience, doctor," she teased as her pants fell from her body and she stepped out of them. It had been so long since I'd seen her this way that even the view of her bare legs beneath the oversized shirt she wore was so damn sexy, and my body reacted accordingly. "Your turn. Lose the pants." I drew in a deep breath, reaching down to unbutton my jeans when she stopped me, shaking her head and waving her finger. No, stand up, I want to see," she said as she sat back down, bending her knee under her chin in that way she knew I couldn't resist. She was the perfect combination of sweet and sexy when she did that, and it drove me insane. "Please." That one simple word caused me to shudder, watching her tilt her head to the side to rest her cheek on her knee. "Oh, she's pulling out all the stops tonight." I stood and pushed my chair back, bringing myself more into her view, as my button came loose, and I lowered my zipper. Her breath became a little heavier, and her teeth dragged over her bottom lip, as the denim slid over my hips and fell to the floor. "God, have I ever told you what great thighs you have?" Bella asked in a breathless voice, her hand rising to massage her breast again. My eyes widened in surprise, not only at her statement, but also with the increasing level of arousal in her voice. While there was no doubt that I'd missed the vixen side of Bella, I hadn't expected her to be as receptive to the level of intimacy between us at that moment for quite some time, let alone initiate it. Desire heavily laced her voice and gaze, as well as her actions, as her hand grazed over her breast and slid beneath the view of the webcam. "Thighs? Huh?" I asked curiously, fighting an amused smile while never taking my gaze off her. Bella's eyes slipped closed and her head leaned back, nodding slowly with her bottom lips held enticingly between her teeth. Fuck, she's beautiful. So firm and muscular. The way they fill out your jeans. The way they feel against me while you're fucking me from behind. I lowered myself back into my chair with a deep groan as memories flooded me, such as the night I took her in New York, bent over the edge of the bed, in Las Vegas, with our hands gripping the headboard. Each time, there was a look of absolute rapture on her face. My cock throbbed and I gripped myself through my boxer briefs, anxious to relieve the ache she was causing in my body. Fuck, let me see you, Bella. Her hazy eyes open with my desperate plea, staring straight into the camera, and she finally stood. Her fingers curled around the left edge of the shirt, lifting the corner to show me a hint of the panties she wore underneath. That thin black strap on her hip that I'd caught before led to deep red satin with black lace overlay. More, I whispered breathlessly as her hand dropped the fabric and repeated the action on the other side, this time tracing her fingers along her bikini line. I need to see that body. Your memory's getting fuzzy? Bella asked, slowly lifting the shirt to expose her lower abdomen and stopping again. Never. I see you every night. My eyes train on her skin, wishing so much that I could touch and kiss it. Well, obviously, she said with a roll of her eyes, finally removing the garment from her body. You'd have to be blind not to. I shook my head, taking in the gorgeous view before me. The dark colors of the bra and panties she wore offset the paleness of her skin, causing my fingers literally to twitch with the urge to touch her. No, baby, after the camera is off, when I'm all alone in bed, missing you, I can't help myself. One perfect eyebrow rose as she gestured for me to stand and remove my shirt as well. You've been getting yourself off without me? I nodded shamelessly and tossed my t-shirt aside. I'd never get to sleep otherwise. You have no idea how hard you make me without even trying. Well, in that case, she said, pursing her lips as her thumbs hooked around the straps on her hips, lowering the skimpy underwear down her legs. I think you owe me an orgasm or two before you get any form of relief tonight, so I'm just going to make myself comfortable. My eyes widened slightly as a devious smile grew on her face along with her statement. The walls of her apartment passed in a blur behind her as she moved until the familiar side of her bed came into view. She set her laptop down on the mattress, teasing me with the last piece of clothing she wore, just as she had the very first time I actually laid eyes on her all those months before. And in the same setting as well. I want to see you, all of you, so I can see your hands at all times, she said in a gravelly voice, heavy with arousal, as she lowered the strap of her bra tortuously slow. I want nothing obscuring my vision of your cock while I imagine it inside of me, not even those amazing fingers. So the boxers have got to go, too. I felt my breaths leaving my body heavily, though I hardly noticed the tightness it caused in my chest. I began rolling my chair back, each movement inciting a more from Bella's lips, until I was at just the right distance for her. Watching her take charge was so fucking hot, but I was also physically aching for her, and knowing that I would be watching her with no relief, it was likely to kill me. Bella hummed contentedly, lowering one side of her bra to reveal her breast as she watched me stand to remove my boxer briefs. That's something I'll never grow tired of. It's like hitting the jackpot every time. I began to roll my eyes, but caught the sight of her lying back on the bed, running her fingertips over her bare breast. My hands gripped the arms of my chair firmly as I sat back down, watching her circle around her nipple and return her eyes to me. I really have missed you so much, she whispered, her hand rising to the front of her bra and unlatching the clasp there. The two sides fell away and her back arched as she slid it from her body, tossing it above her head. I miss you touching me, kissing me, fucking me until nothing else in the world exists. I watched Bella's fingers slither down her body and slip inside her with the last words to leave her lips. An audible gasp filled my ears and caused my cock to send another painful reminder to my brain that there was a beautiful, naked woman on my screen and I was doing nothing about it. You're killing me, baby. A smirk tugged at her lips, and she shook her head, rolling toward the camera. I haven't even begun, baby, she replied, repeating my sentiment, and then shifting her body, so that the camera was directly between her legs. My grip tightened on the arms of my chair, as it became all the more difficult to restrain myself when her fingers slid along her clit and began circling it in a tantalizing motion. Now I've begun, and don't you dare touch that cock. I clenched my jaw, watching her as she pleasured herself in front of me. All the while, her eyes remained focused on the screen. And if I do? There will be consequences, she replied breathlessly. Leaning forward in my chair with my elbows on the armrests, I shook my head. I don't think there will. Dare to try me? She challenged with a calm voice, but the motion of her hand spoke in contradiction as it increased in speed against her. This was exactly what she wanted. I think I do, I replied, nodding as my hand loosened its grip on the chair and moved to my cock. I kept it still, torturing myself but also sparking a fire inside her, and her eyes narrowed. Not a damn thing you can do about it, is there, sweetheart? Oh God, she growled through clenched teeth, her eyes closing tightly. You just wait. Her heavy pants removed all conviction from her attempted threat, her breasts rising and falling in rhythm with each breath. I'm trembling, Bella, I stated sarcastically with a cocky grin, and my hand began its movement. I don't think you'd want to carry it through even if you were here to stop me. Then again, I'd be buried inside you and making you come before you had a chance to give it any thought. Bella moaned a loud fuck, and her half-lidded eyes pinched shut, at which my emotions increased. I closed my own briefly in the sheer pleasure of the moment before returning my gaze to her. 1 month 3 weeks 4 days shit. Watching Bella in the midst of orgasm had always been a beautiful and fascinating sight to me, but hearing her count down the time we had left before we'd finally be together again at the same time, it quickly became my breaking point as well. I felt the pit of my stomach coil, the tendons in my neck flex, and the warm flush surge through my body, before I released a resonating groan with my climax. Nothing and no one could ever make me come the way Bella did. Even the memories of her I'd been coaxing out of the back of my mind every single night. Nothing compared to staring into those beautiful green eyes, taking in the exact shape of those full pouty lips and every curve of her gorgeous body. My eyes remained closed for several moments as I fought to regain myself, but I finally looked up to find her sprawled across her bed, almost appearing as if she were sleeping. Bella, you think you could call about that apartment tomorrow while I'm at school, since you're off? She asked, yet only her lips moved and her voice was soft. The closer I am to you, the better. This is torture. I chuckled lightly and her eyes finally opened, a smile slowly spreading across her lips. I reached down for the clean towel I still kept in my drawer, nodding as I wiped down my chest. Yeah, I can take care of that for you. Thank you, she whispered, her eyes slipping closed again. I thought about saying goodnight right then and letting her sleep, but one thing kept nagging at my thoughts. Baby, I stated softly, rolling closer to the desk, and she hummed in response. Nothing, all this time? I fibbed, Bella replied, and her lips began twitching in restraint of a smile. My eyes widened and she laughed when she finally looked at me. There's no way I couldn't. I see you every night too, Edward. I sighed, running my hand through my hair as I continued to gaze at her face. She was so much different from the girl who'd messaged me in drunken randomness months before, and I was nowhere near the same man. I'd experienced true happiness and love, as well as heartbreak and despair. Everything I'd never taken the time to experience or even acknowledge its existence. For the first time, I wasn't fitting a relationship into a career, but finding a way for the two parts of myself to coexist. And as for Bella, gone was the nervous, unsure girl who'd logged on that second night finally sober. In her place was a beautiful, confident woman, taking charge of her life for the first time. Even after her attack, once she got her feet on the ground and her attacker in custody, she persevered where 6 months before, she still might have crumbled. Nothing in our lives was perfect, nor would it ever be. We'd both finally come to the realization that it didn't need to be in order for us to be perfectly content within it. I love you, Bella, I whispered, watching her eyes fighting to stay open. You should get some sleep. Bella reluctantly nodded and sat up. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I love you too, Edward. Good night. And with one last kiss blown from her fingertips, my screen went black. Late Night Encounters Epilogue. Just crossed the state line. So sick of driving already. See you after work. Love you. The moment my phone vibrated in my pocket that morning at work, my heart began to race without even looking down at it. I knew it was Bella, and she was just that much closer. After all the daily conversations that lasted well into the night, texts through my long hours at work, and months of waiting, the day had finally come for Bella's arrival in Chicago. After finishing up the sutures on a 9-year-old girl's finger, I took advantage of the slow morning in the air and headed down to the cafeteria to eat and read her message. I can't wait to see you. Be home by 7:30. Love you too, baby. I was acutely aware that the knowledge that she was so close would make the remainder of my 12-hour shift drag, but it would be worth it. At the end of the day, I would be going home to Bella. Been seeing a lot of that smile lately, Nurse Banner remarked as she startled me by sitting down across table. I watched the wrinkles deepen around her eyes with her kind smile, as I fought my own from widening and shrugged. Wouldn't have anything to do with a certain little brunette I've seen on your desk, would it? Yeah, my girlfriend just graduated from UCLA and is moving here this weekend, I replied and slid my phone back into my pocket. She'll be here tonight. I'd always wondered when a good one would snatch you up, she spoke softly before taking a bite of her sandwich. Guess that explains why the illustrious Dr. Cullen, who almost never takes time off, will be on vacation next week? I chuckled softly and nodded, shifting my food around the plate. It felt strange to be talking about Bella with someone besides Emmett, which even that had dwindled to occasional phone calls since his move to law. Though disappointing to have our friends so far away, for both Bella and myself, Emmett's visit to the city had sparked a love for it in him, and after much convincing by him that California would hold more opportunities for Rose than Chicago, she relented. He'd come back long enough to put in his notice with the hospital and pack up his apartment before he was back to the missus. Yet, I hadn't realized how much of a secret my girlfriend of 5 months had actually been, as it was not my intention. Few people had entered my office to see her pictures on my desk, and even fewer had been around me as I spoke to her on the phone during my breaks. I'd never been an overly social person to begin with, so it didn't seem out of the ordinary that I hadn't talked to anyone else about her. However, sitting across from someone and having a conversation about my girlfriend felt good, really good. You deserve it, Dr. Cullen. It's nice to see you distracted by something not involving this hospital once in a while, she said with a soft giggle, wiping her mouth with a napkin. I shifted slightly in my chair and drew in a deep breath. I knew I'd changed a lot in the past few months, pushing my brakes to the very last second just for a few more moments to talk to Bella, when I'd rarely taken more than a couple minutes before. Looking forward to the ends of my shifts and going home, rather than approaching it as something I needed to do. However, I wasn't aware it had been noticeable to others as well. That bad? Huh? No, not bad, just different. It's actually been nice to see you not driving yourself into the ground finally, she replied, reaching across the table to rest her hand on mine. You're an excellent doctor, one of a kind. Everyone knows that, and in my 25 years here, I'd be hard-pressed to remember a better one. But there's more to life than these sterile walls, and we'd all hate to see you burn yourself out before you realize that. The older woman's words continued to ring in my ears, even as she stood and walked away to return to work. I hadn't realized how much I actually was burning myself out before Bella stumbled into my life. She was my angel in so many ways, and more than I ever deserved. And I knew exactly how lucky I was to have her. The hours ticked by like days as I returned to work, moving from bed to bed and wishing more than ever for 7 o'clock to arrive. My anxiety grew more when I didn't hear anything else from Bella, even long after she should have already arrived at my apartment. When my phone finally buzzed again in my pocket around 6, I sighed heavily in relief as I looked at the received text. Please tell me Chicago traffic is not always this bad. I could walk faster than this. She was in Chicago, exactly where didn't matter at that moment, just that she was there. Just pay attention to the road. I'll see you soon, I typed back as I moved to the next patient, and offered Nurse Banner a small smile and a wink as we passed each other. I swore I heard her laugh softly behind me, and I looked back to see her giving me a thumbs up before settling back into the seat at her desk. After a seemingly endless array of the start of summer influx of patients streamed into the ER near the end of my shift, I was relieved when I glanced down at my watch, for what had to be the 100th time in an hour. 6:59. One more minute, and then I couldn't get out of there fast enough. Have a nice vacation, Dr. Cullen, Nurse Banner said with a chuckle as she walked by while I was hanging my coat in the locker. That's the plan, I replied with a smile, closing the door quickly and waving goodnight to her on the way out. I counted every street sign that passed, tapping my fingers impatiently on the steering wheel at every stoplight. The reality that I would actually be seeing Bella that night hit me with full force, but even the short distance to my apartment was excruciating. I wanted nothing more than to touch her, hold her against me, and inhale her scent. Everything I'd missed so much, it hurt. When I finally pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex, I anxiously began scanning each space for her car. As I parked mine in front of my building, I grabbed my phone from my pocket as I stepped out. Just as I was about to start dialing, I spotted a set of headlights coming toward me and paused. I closed my door and watched as the car slowed, pulling into the space beside mine and shutting off. My smile grew the instant I caught the hint of a loose brown ponytail peeking up above the door, and I began moving around my car toward her. Bella finally turned to face me, and a tired smile appeared on her face, her shoulders visibly relaxing the moment her eyes met mine. I made it. Without hesitating long enough to respond, I closed the distance between us and swept her into my arms. She laughed, clinging around my neck as I lifted her from the ground and spun her around, burying my face in her neck. "Oh God, you're here. You're finally here." Bella's fingers wove into my hair, wrapping her legs around my hips and hanging onto me tightly. We remained wrapped around each other for several silent moments until her body began to tremble in my arms. I lifted my face to look at her, and she kissed along my cheek, meeting my eyes briefly with her tear-filled ones, before pressing her lips against the corner of my mouth. "Hi," she said in barely above a whisper, tracing her fingertips along my jaw. "Hi," I teased, and she giggled against my lips as I sealed them over hers. Slowly, they parted and we both moaned in contentment as her tongue glided along mine. The kiss was passionate, yet not demanding, signifying it among every other kiss we'd shared. There was no more racing against the clock or saying a long goodbye ever again. Nothing but enjoying every moment we had together. We slowly pulled apart and our foreheads leaned together, her fingers running along the back of my neck. "What took you so long?" I sighed jokingly, my eyes still closed as I reveled in the feel of her in my arms a little longer. "Sorry, but one speeding ticket in Denver was more than enough," she murmured and unwound her legs from around me. My eyes shot open and I felt my brow crease as I looked at her, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "A speeding ticket? You never mentioned a speeding ticket." Bella shrugged as I lowered her feet to the ground. "I didn't want you to worry that I wasn't being safe. It wasn't by much. I was just in a hurry to see my man." My hands rose to hold her face between them, and I kissed her softly. "I'm not going anywhere, baby." Her smile returned and she lifted onto her toes to brush her lips gently against mine. "As much as I'd love to stand here all night in your arms, I doubt your neighbors would appreciate the view much." I chuckled and wrapped my arm around her shoulders, pressing my lips to her temple. "On the contrary, I think they would enjoy the view of a beautiful woman in their parking lot entirely too much." "Flattery will get you nowhere, Mr. Cullen," Bella laughed as she hugged herself against my side. "I've been in that car since I left the motel last night, and I'm in desperate need of a shower." "You're still the most beautiful thing in my life, baby," I whispered, unable to resist kissing her one more time as we reached my door. We entered my apartment and I flipped on the light, finally able to take her in fully. "So damn beautiful." Bella slid her arms around my waist and pressed her face against my chest, releasing an embarrassed laugh as her stomach growled. "Have you eaten it all today?" I asked in concern, looking down at her, hiding her face in my shirt. "No, I was hoping to get here in time to shower and make you dinner before you got home, so I didn't stop," she mumbled grumpily. "Can see how well that worked out." I smiled at the muttered grumble under her breath and ran my hands along her arms. "Don't worry about that. Just go take a shower, and I'll order some food." "I need to get my bags," she said and started for the door, but I grabbed her hand and pulled her back. "Like you've never raided my clothes before?" I teased, tugging lightly on the shirt she was wearing, my t-shirt. She bit her lip with a blush and looked down, nodding slowly. "Just go take a shower and relax. We can deal with all that in the morning before we leave. Tomorrow, right?" "Parents," Bella said nervously, her body tensing slightly. "Baby, you have less to worry about tomorrow than I do, believe me. My mother has been waiting to meet you for months, and she never misses an opportunity to remind me of that." I lifted her chin with the tips of my fingers and kissed her gently, before she pulled away and headed for the bedroom. I just closed the door and was carrying the bag of Chinese takeout into the kitchen when Bella walked out and settled onto the couch. Her head leaned back and she closed her eyes, releasing a slow breath. "It feels so good to sit somewhere other than my car." Her voice came out in something akin to a moan, and I gazed at her from the kitchen while I plated our food. Dressed in nothing more than a pair of my shorts and a t-shirt, her wet hair clinging to the skin of her neck and shoulders, she'd never looked sexier even through her obvious exhaustion. "Are you going to make it through dinner?" I asked with a light laugh as I sat beside her, setting our plates on the coffee table. Just give me a minute," she murmured with a slight nod. I smiled and stabbed a piece of chicken with the fork and held it to her lips. "Open." Bella laughed tiredly and opened her eyes. "Edward, you don't have to feed me." "Oh, humor me and open. You need to eat," I replied with a chuckle. Bella rolled her eyes with a smile and took the fork into her mouth and then closed them again as she chewed. Her hand rested on my thigh and ran slowly along the denim, turning her head to look at me. "I can't believe I'm really here. I thought today would never come." "Me too," I whispered, tracing along her cheek with the backs of my fingers, before leaning toward her and kissing her gently. Her hand rose to cup my jaw and hold me against her, taking my bottom lip between hers and pulling me closer. Baby, we have all night. I know, she sighed against my lips, her fingers trailing down my neck and chest, until her hand fell to my lap. I've just missed you so much. It's been a long 3 months. I've missed you, too, baby, but you need to eat. Doctor's orders, I replied, and she lightly slapped my thigh with a laugh, mumbling a "not my doctor" under her breath, as she finally sat up to eat. Once we finished dinner, I brought our plates to the sink, and by the time I returned, Bella's eyes were already closed again. Her chest rose and fell in slow, even breaths, and she looked so peaceful. I hated the thought of waking her up, even to bring her to bed. I made my way over to the couch, running my fingers lightly along her arm to wake her without startling her too much. Her eyes flew open and she sat up quickly, rubbing her hands over her face briskly. "Sorry, guess I'm just more tired than I thought," she mumbled, taking my hand and gently tugging me down to her. "Nothing to apologize for. Let's go to bed," I whispered against her lips, sliding my arms underneath her to lift her off the couch. Bella's head rested on my shoulders, and her fingers toyed lightly with the hair at my neck. "But it's barely even 9. I chuckled, leaning my cheek against her hair as we entered the bedroom. "And you just drove a couple thousand miles over the last few days. I'm pretty sure I can forgive you for being tired." As I set her down on the bed, she immediately curled into the covers while I stood to undress, and then climbed in beside her. She rolled over to face me, snuggling into my arms and draping her leg over mine. Her eyes opened sleepily, and she brushed her lips softly against mine. "But we haven't made love yet either." "Enough buts," I murmured, kissing her forehead and hugging her against my chest. "I plan on making love to you every single night I can, but I doubt it would do either of us any good if you fell asleep halfway through." "That was a but," she grumbled, sliding her arm around my waist and pressing her body closer to me. "Just sleep," I whispered, running my hands soothingly over her hair, but she never responded again, and her soft snores soon followed. Bella fidgeted in the passenger seat throughout the entire 20-minute drive to visit my parents, twisting her fingers in her lap, until we pulled to a stop in front of the house. She released a sharp gasp when I reached over to rest my hand over hers and gave them a gentle squeeze, her head spinning quickly to look at me. "Baby, relax. You're not being dragged to an executioner," I said gently, and her hands loosened minimally on each other. "I know. Just what if they don't like me? What if I trip and fall flat on my face and embarrass the hell out of myself?" she replied with hastened breaths, leaning her head back against the headrest. I linked my fingers with hers and brought her hand to my lips, kissing it gently. "Bella, you just spoke to my mother this morning on the phone. Did it really sound like she doesn't like you?" "There's a big difference between talking on the phone and meeting face to face," she sighed, and her gaze returned out the window. "I mean, am I really what she envisioned for her son? Her only child? Am I what your father envisioned for his little girl?" I asked pointedly, keeping her hand in mine as I rested it on my thigh. "You make me happy, Bella. That's all that really matters to either of them, okay?" Bella took a deep breath and nodded, gazing up at the house one more time. Her fingers gripped mine tightly, and she still made no motion to get out of the car. I turned her face toward me and leaned in to kiss her gently. "I love you." "I love you too," she whispered against my lips, her eyes remaining closed for a moment as she slowly exhaled her held breath and then finally looked at me again. "Okay, I'm ready now." I smiled and released her hand to step out of the car, reclaiming it in mine as we met at the front. The door of the house swung open, and my mother emerged from inside with a wide smile on her face. She came toward us and embraced me, and I hugged her tightly in return. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," she cried, standing on her toes to kiss my cheek before pulling away and looking to the woman at my side. "This must be Bella. You're even prettier than your picture." Bella laughed nervously as my mother embraced her as tightly as she had me, her cheeks coloring in embarrassment at the compliment. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Cullen." My mother pulled back with tears in her eyes, holding Bella's face between her hands. "And it's so wonderful to finally meet you. I was beginning to think my son would never smarten up and settle down." "Mom," I groaned, running my hand through my hair. "Well, it's the truth," my mother replied in a nonchalant tone, shrugging and looking back to Bella. "And please just call me Esm." "So, where's Dad?" I asked, changing the subject upon noticing the absence of my father's car. My mother kept her arm around Bella's shoulders as she escorted us into the house, almost as if afraid that she would disappear if she let her go, a feeling I was all too familiar with. "Oh, he'll be back. I just sent him out to pick up a few things for me." While my mother retreated to the kitchen to finish lunch, I walked outside to find Bella staring out at the backyard from the same footbridge I'd stood on months before, pondering what an ass I'd been. I walked along the edge of the water until I reached her, sliding my arms around her waist from behind and pressing my lips to her hair. "What are you doing out here?" "Just thinking," she replied softly, leaning back against me as the soft breeze blew her soft locks over my cheek. "You didn't tell me you were this rich. I don't think I've ever seen a house that big in my life, except in pictures. You could put 2 of my bedrooms back home into your kitchen. How am I supposed to fit into all this?" I gazed at her profile for a moment before turning her in my arms to face me. "Okay, first of all, my parents have the money, not me." Bella rolled her eyes and shook her head, resting her hands on my chest. "It's the same thing, Edward." "No, it's not," I replied, taking her face in my hands. "And even if it was, it wouldn't matter. We fit, right? That's all that counts." Bella shifted nervously, bringing her eyes to meet mine with a deep breath and nodding. I smiled and leaned in to kiss her until our peaceful moment was interrupted. "Hey, loser, quit making out with your girlfriend and get up here so I can wish my friend a happy birthday." A familiar, boisterous voice echoed across the yard, and I turned to find Emmett and Rosalie standing on the back porch beside my father. Surprise! Taking Bella's hand, we walked toward them, where I was immediately engulfed in a hug. "What the hell are you doing here, you brute?" Emmett's laugh joined mine as he pulled away, smacking my shoulder in the process, while the girls shared an emotional embrace. "Like I'd miss my best friend's birthday and your mom's cooking? Do you not know me at all?" "Yeah, I'm practically killing him with mine." To hear him tell it, Rose piped in as she released Bella, turning to wrap her arms around me instead. "So glad you finally pulled your head out of your ass." I looked to Emmett as her shoulders began to tremble and her grip tighten on me. "Hormones," he mouthed and my eyes widened. "You guys are pregnant?" Bella asked in shock, looking between them. Rose pulled away from me and glanced at Emmett. "No, I'm pregnant." He was just along for the ride and the fun part. "Congratulations, both of you," I added as Rose's eyes turned to glare at me. I quickly took Bella's hand while Emmett wrapped his arms around his wife's shoulders, turning toward my father and clearing my throat at his expectant gaze. "Dad, this is Bella. Pleasure to meet you, Bella," my dad replied with a smile, taking her hand and leaning in to kiss her cheek, and then looked back to me. "Your mother said lunch is just about ready." Back at my apartment that night, I sat on my bed and ran over the day's events in my mind. Once Rosalie arrived, Bella seemed more at ease, and by that evening, the 2 women were chatting and laughing with my mother, as if they were old friends. Her smile returned and even grew whenever her eyes would meet mine, where I stood talking with my father and Emmett. "Marry this one. She's a keeper," was my father's parting statement, whispered to me as we were leaving, eyeing me meaningfully from the doorway as we began making our way down the driveway. The bathroom door opening broke me from my train of thought, and Bella stepped out with her hands behind her back. "Okay, so I had no idea what to get you for your birthday," she started with a heavy sigh, walking toward the bed and kneeling on the end of the mattress. "I know you said I didn't have to, but I really did. Even with everything we've been through in the last 9 months or so, it's still been the best 9 months of my life, and if nothing else, I wanted to say thank you, and I love you. So, happy birthday." I watched as her hand came out from behind her and held out a red envelope. I sat up and folded my legs in front of me, taking it from her and shaking my head. "Bella, the best birthday present I've ever gotten is sitting right here in front of me. Just open it," she replied with a soft laugh, gesturing toward the envelope. Sliding my finger underneath the loose flap, I lifted it and pulled out the contents. It was a generic birthday card, but what was inside caused my forehead to crease slightly. "A key?" Bella held her breath and nodded, releasing it shakily. "To my apartment. I know it's probably stupid and pointless, since you'll most likely never have to use it. I guess it's more of a symbolic thing. Just because we live apart doesn't mean I want to be apart. I think we've done enough of that." Her eyes nervously rose to meet mine as I gazed at her in stunned bewilderment, until my smile broke through, and I wove my free hand into her hair. Pulling her gently toward me, I felt her fingers run along my thighs, while mine curled around the back of her neck as our lips met, our kiss deepening with soft moans echoing from both of us. "My birthday was damn near flawless before," I whispered breathlessly as my lips broke away from hers, opening my eyes to gaze at her beautiful face. "Thank you for making it absolutely perfect." "It's just a key, Edward. It's no gold watch or World Series tickets or anything," Bella replied with an uncomfortable laugh, listing through the gifts I'd received from my family and Emmett. It's not just a key, Bella, I said, wrapping my arms around her and turning our bodies to lay her on the bed, hovering above her and brushing her lips softly with mine again. It's your key and your trust. That means more to me than anything, and I promise to earn it every single day from here on out. Bella gazed up at me with an adoring look in her eyes as she traced her fingertips along my face. Her arms slowly made their way around my shoulders, bringing my lips back to hers in a silent acceptance, and sliding her foot along my calf. Why don't you open the rest of your present? My brow furrowed as my eyes glanced once again to the card I still held until she turned my chin with her fingers to look at her, trailing them down her throat to the skin exposed by the parting of her satin robe. Realization dawned on me as I watched their path and then looked up to the mischievous smirk on her lips. I felt every muscle in my face relax at once as I propped my head on my hand, while the other swept down the valley between her breasts to the tie of her robe. Her arms fell to either side of her head as the two ends came free, and I parted the fabric to find her completely naked underneath. I stand corrected. Now it's perfect. Bella's laugh filled the room as I buried my face in the crook of her neck with a deep groan, sliding my arms underneath her and rolling us over until she was straddling my hips. She sat up and allowed the fabric of her robe to fall from her shoulders, my eyes trailing over every inch of her skin as it became exposed. Drawing in a slow breath, her hands covered mine as they ran over her stomach and up to her breasts, her tongue moistening her lower lip as my thumbs brushed her nipples. Her fingertips traced down my arms as she exhaled with her head tilted back in pleasure, raising it again as they ran up my chest and neck until they cradled my face, her lips lowering to meet mine, and her hips rolling against me. I groaned deep in my throat as my hands moved down her sides, gripping her thighs and fighting every urge inside me to flip her over again and bury myself within her. Every rock of her body as she kissed down my neck caused a rush to flow through me until I felt her warmth disappear, except for the soft brushes of her lips. My fingers weaved into her hair as she reached my abdomen, trailing her chin lightly along the waistband of my pants, and looking up at me with heavily lidded eyes. Bella. Her hands rested on my hips to hold them down as they involuntarily lifted from the bed toward her, wanting her so badly, I could barely contain myself. Relax, baby. Let me spoil you a little for your birthday. Her words only added to the tension, the desperate need to feel every inch of her. My eyes closed and my neck arched back into the pillow as she sealed her lips over my erection through the fabric, massaging me from base to tip. In a tortuously slow movement, she hooked her fingers into the sides of my pants, pulling them over my hips and down my legs, until she removed them completely and tossed them to the floor. I opened my eyes again when I felt her breasts brush against my shins as she placed light kisses on each of my knees. So, what would you like for your birthday, Edward? She purred in a sultry voice, taking my cock in her hand and stroking me slowly. My voice stalled in my throat at the feel of her soft skin against mine, and shook my head with heavy pants escaping me. Tell me. I've already gotten it, baby. Oh, well, then I guess I can stop if that's the case, Bella taunted as she began pulling away, and I grabbed her free hand, shaking my head again. Then tell me. Mouth. I want to feel your mouth first. I finally managed to gasp as her fingertips returned to caress the head of my erection. I was hoping you'd say that, Bella whispered, tracing her tongue along the underside before taking me between her lips. Her warm mouth engulfed me until I hit the back of her throat, and she began to pull back, meeting my eyes briefly as she circled the tip with her tongue, and then glided back down. Shit, Bella, I breathed out heavily, my fingers clenching the comforter beneath me to keep from thrusting my hips against the heavenly feel of her mouth. Her tongue and lips continued to massage me until I began feeling the tightening in my gut, and I brought my hands to her face. Baby, I'm gonna come. Bella gazed up at me, lifting her head as her fingers wrapped around the base of my cock again. Isn't that the point? Inside you. I want to be inside you, I replied with a groan, taking her free hand at my hip in mine and tugging gently. With one final brush of her lips against me, she crawled back up my body and straddled my hips again, and I groaned with the feel of her warm, slickened skin gliding against me. As you wish, she whispered, guiding me to her entrance and lowering onto me. She moaned as I slowly filled her, pressing her lips to mine, as our bodies joined together fully. Oh God, fuck, I muttered breathlessly, my fingers gripping her ass to press deeper and thrust up to her. It felt like forever since I'd felt anything as euphoric as the sensation of her surrounding me, even though it had actually been only a few months. That I could hear her soft breaths and moans, feel her skin against mine, and see with every look how much she loved me, and I wanted to relish in every moment. All in due time, baby, she murmured, taking my bottom lip between hers and tugging lightly before she sat up. Leaning back, her hands rested on my thighs and gripped them firmly as her hips began to move over me, gradually increasing in speed and urgency. My eyes locked on where our bodies joined, watching as my cock repeatedly disappeared inside her, and I released a heavy breath. I brought my hand between her legs, circling with my fingertips, and her head fell back with a gasp. "Edward, this isn't about me, fuck," she growled, biting down on her lip hard. "It's supposed to be for you." "It is," I replied in a gravelly tone, increasing the pressure of my fingertips against her. "I want to watch you come." Bella released a throaty groan, arching her back more as her hips thrust down against mine. Her nails began to dig into the skin of my thighs, and I hissed at the resulting pinch, driving myself into her more insistently. "God, yes." I watched her body begin to tremble as she growled through clenched teeth, and my hands moved to grasp her hips to hold her still. Her muscles went rigid as her orgasm swept over her, my thrusts forcing heavy pants to escape her parted lips with her eyes squeezed tight. As she began to go limp in my hold, I pulled her down to me and rolled us over to settle between her legs, gazing down at her flushed face. "Best birthday present ever," I whispered against her lips. I felt her arms slide around my back, her leg bending at my hip and pressing me deep inside her. She tightened her embrace around me as I began to move again, soft moans filling the air, and I could not take my eyes off her. "God, you're so fucking beautiful." Bella's eyes opened to gaze up at me, her fingertips tracing lightly over my shoulder blades. I kept my movements slow, watching each breath that escaped her with every thrust. More. Rising up on my elbows, I gripped the pillow beneath her head with my hands and drove into her with a new sense of urgency. I was rewarded with a long, lingering moan escaping her, and I could feel my muscles begin to tighten with my impending orgasm. "Shit, Bella." Her nails dragged along my back as she arched against me, gripping at my lower back until my breath caught and I released inside her. My body slowly relaxed and I collapsed on top of her, feeling her fingers run through my dampened hair as her breaths began to calm as well. We lay silently for several minutes, touching and brushing soft kisses against each other's skin before I rolled off her, and she immediately curled against my side. My heart raced rapidly against her cheek, and I pulled the blankets over us when she shivered against the breeze, ghosting over our bodies from the ceiling fan above. Her head tilted to look up at me, and I gently brushed away the hair clinging to her face, tucking it behind her ear. "I love you," Bella whispered, arching her neck more to bring her lips to mine. "I love you too," I whispered against her lips, pulling her body more firmly against my side. "Thank you." "For what?" she replied with a soft chuckle, running her finger along my jaw. "For not giving up on me," I said seriously as I gazed into her eyes, her smile faltering slightly before meeting my lips with hers. "Never." 6 months later. The snow fell heavily around me as I stepped out of the hospital and drew in a deep breath of the biting air, fighting the tears gathering in my eyes and the anger boiling beneath the surface. I needed to collect myself before I got into my car and drove home, where Bella would be waiting for me to go out for the evening as we did every Friday after work. "It's part of my lot as a doctor," I reminded myself, but for the first time in as long as I could remember, it wasn't working. I released a loud growl and drove my fist into the side of the nearby dumpster. Hearing footsteps closing in quickly from behind me, firm hands gripped my shoulders and pulled me back, despite my struggle to break free. "Dr. Cullen, there was nothing more you could do. She was too far gone before she even got to us." Nurse Banner's soothing voice attempted to calm me, gripping her arms securely around my chest. "It was senseless. I could kill that son of a bitch," I yelled out, uncaring to who else could hear me at that moment. "Edward," she spoke softly, tightening her hold on me. "As much as I agree with you, you know you have to let it go." I allowed her to guide me to sit on the bench beside us and leaned my head back, feeling her hand running along my arm. How do you let something like this go?" Nurse Banner sighed heavily, her eyes lowering. "I don't know, but we all need to if we ever hope to keep doing our jobs." She paused, taking my hand in hers and releasing a sharp gasp. "You're bleeding. Come back inside and let me clean you up." I sat up and shook my head, flexing my fingers painfully against my swollen knuckles. "No, I can't go back in there tonight. Not while that bastard still breathes in my air." "When?" I trailed off and her arm wrapped around my shoulders. "Then will you at least let me call you a cab? You shouldn't be driving in this condition, and certainly not on these roads." "No," I replied, clearing my throat and rubbing the heels of my palms over my eyes. "Thank you, but I'll be fine. I should really just get home to Bella, alright? If you're sure, she conceded reluctantly, and I met her eyes with a nod. She stood from the bench and pulled on her gloves, resting her hand on my shoulder for a moment before making her way out to her car. I remained for a moment longer, attempting to calm and slow my breaths before methodically walking out to the parking lot. The only things keeping me aware of my actions all the way home was the cold air blasting my face from the open window, and my desire to get to Bella. We could go out, I could focus on her, and I wouldn't have to think about the horrific experience of that evening for another 2 days before I had to return to the hospital. I could hear the music from inside my apartment, along with Bella's slightly off-key voice singing along, as I made my way up the stairs. Her happiness and carefree mood practically radiated through the wood door, and I found myself sliding down the wall to the floor, my head in my hands. How could I walk in there and shatter that beautiful sound? And on the same token, how could I manage to go in and pretend that nothing was wrong? Suddenly, the music inside silenced and the door opened, and I lowered my head between my bent knees only a second before she emerged. "Edward, what are you doing out here, and why are you on the floor? Are you hurt?" Bella's soft voice rang above me, and I found it impossible to respond. My hands drove further into my hair until my arms encased the back of my head, folding into myself. Despite my efforts to keep myself composed, my eyes burned and my shoulders began to shake. I felt her knees brush against my thigh as she knelt beside me, her hand running up and down my back. "Baby, you're scaring me. Are you okay?" I could only shake my head slowly from side to side, my arms folding in front of me and propped on my knees, still keeping my face hidden from her. She pulled me gently into her arms, and I rested my head against her chest, feeling her lips press against my hair. "I lost a patient tonight. I just need a few minutes, and then I'll change so we can go." "Oh God, Edward," Bella said with a shuddering breath, holding me more tightly against her, and my arms moved to cling around her waist. "We're not going anywhere. I'll call and cancel the reservations, and then we can sit down and talk while I bandage that hand of yours." "Bella, I can't. I just can't," I replied, the dam inside my chest finally bursting from the pressure that had been building for over an hour. When I'd been forced to cease compressions, hearing the words repeating over and over in my ears, "Call it, Dr. Cullen. She's not coming back. Call it." My eyes remained frozen on the lifeless form in front of me, the incessant tone of the flat line on the monitor drowning into the background as I backed away slowly. Time of death 1824. I barely managed to choke out before exiting into the hall and vomiting into the first trash can I came to. Never through all the years of my internship and residency had I ever felt so out of control of my emotions or possessed such a weak constitution, or else I never would have made it through med school. "It's okay, we don't have to talk about it," Bella whispered softly, brushing my hair back from my face with her fingers. She pressed her lips to my forehead and began to pull away to stand, but I gripped tighter around her, holding her still. "Edward, let's just get inside, okay?" Her gentle voice was soothing, and my arms relaxed, allowing her to help me to stand. She kept a hold around my waist as I walked shakily into the apartment, guiding me over to the couch. I fell back into the cushions and covered my face with my hands, listening as Bella made the call to cancel our reservation as she hurried to the bathroom to grab the first aid kit. When the couch sank beside me, I finally allowed my hands to fall into my lap, while Bella removed her heels and tucked her legs beneath her. She remained quiet while she cleaned the abrasions on my knuckles, and I was grateful for the silence. I gazed at her and took in her appearance, feeling a pang of guilt rushing through me. She looked absolutely beautiful in the deep red dress she wore, her hair pulled back off her shoulders, and showed the diamond earrings I'd given her for her birthday. It was supposed to be the last night we spent together, just the two of us, before the holiday season began. The following day, we were heading up to my parents' house for the remainder of the weekend to help my mother decorate the house, and I'd be on call all the next week. While she never complained, I knew she was more often than not very disappointed. Once she had my hand bandaged, she set the metal box on the coffee table and sat back, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. "I'm sorry about our date tonight, Bella," I finally spoke, leaning my head against her. "I'll make it up to you, I promise." I physically cringed the moment the all too familiar words left my lips, as I'd sworn to never use them again with Bella. I'd said them way too many times in the past for countless broken promises, yet she only moved closer to me, pressing her lips to my hair. "Don't apologize, I completely understand. We'll have other nights. Do you want me to get you anything?" I sat up and shook my head, leaning my elbows on my knees. Actually, I'd just like to go to bed if that's okay. You want me to go? She asked in a concerned voice, her hand running gently over my back. Without even looking up, I quickly draped my arm around her legs to keep her beside me, surprising us both. The thought of being without her that night filled me with a sense of uneasiness, more so than any other night, rare as they were, that we didn't spend together. Please stay. All right, she whispered as she kissed my temple, sending another calming current rushing through me. And standing from the couch, as I rose, I took her hand with my uninjured one and led her to the bedroom. I undressed quickly and climbed into bed, my mind racing and running over the evening while I waited for her to change. In the past, home would have been the last place I wanted to be, and I would have opted instead for a couple of drinks at the bar, calling Emmett to drive me to my apartment when I'd felt sufficiently numbed. Yet coming home to Bella was the only thing on my mind, wanting nothing more than to see her face and feel her arms around me. Still, she'd surprised me with her actions. Bella didn't pressure me to talk, insisting that it would make me feel better to get it out. She didn't make me feel guilty for canceling our plans for the evening, regardless of how many hours she'd spent getting ready and doing her hair. When she looked at me, I saw nothing but genuine concern, patience and understanding, and it rendered me speechless. When she finally climbed into bed with me, I moved behind her before she could turn over, pressing my body against her back and burying my face in the soft waves of her hair. I felt her fingertips trail lightly along my arm to my hand, running gently over the bandage covering my knuckles. Does it hurt much? I sighed and shook my head, securing my arm around her middle. No, it's fine. It's my own stupid fault for punching the damn dumpster. Bella's head turned suddenly to look back at me, her fingers closing around my wrist. You punched a dumpster? I drew in a deep breath and let it out slowly, rolling onto my back and staring at the ceiling. She carefully turned toward me, resting her hand on my chest. My gaze moved to her, watching her eyes flicker over my face nervously. It's not the first time I've lost a patient, but I couldn't handle this one, Bella. I came closer to throwing my entire career away tonight than I ever thought I possibly could. It was just so horrible. She cut me off with her fingers pressing against my lips, shaking her head. You don't have to explain yourself to me, Edward. Taking her hand in mine, I pressed my lips to her fingertips before lowering them back to my chest. Yes, I do. Bella took a deep breath, sliding her fingers between mine and rubbing her thumb along the side of my hand. She waited patiently as I swallowed hard, gaining the strength I needed to continue. Strength I knew, in that moment, came from her. I couldn't save her. I thought it couldn't get any worse than losing a child in the air, but I was wrong. There's nothing worse than a 5-year-old little girl coming to you coding, and there's not a damn thing you can do for her. By the end of my statement, my teeth were clenched so tight, I was certain they would shatter. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply through my nose, attempting to gain control of my emotions, but it proved futile as I felt the backs of her fingers brush away a tear that had escaped the corner of my eye. As a doctor, I know I'm supposed to remain emotionally detached, but as a man, I just couldn't, not when her father, the one man who should have protected her with his life, put her there. I heard Bella's sharp gasp beside me, and I opened my eyes to look over to her, tears spilling down her face as well. I pulled her closer, wrapping my arms around her as her head rested on my chest. He was so intoxicated that we could barely understand a word of what he was saying, but he put that beautiful little girl into his car and hit black ice. He got a broken leg and a bump on the head, and my voice froze, and I tightened my hold around Bella, her hand curling around my shoulder and her lips pressing against my chest, and all over a damn custody battle. How can someone be so stupid and selfish? What in the world is more important than your child? Bella's eyes rose to my face, and I could feel her gaze on me even as mine focused on the ceiling again. I'd never really given a lot of thought to having children myself or being a father, but the night's events brought my entire future flashing before me. How it would feel to hold my child in my arms for the first time, to watch a little boy or girl take their first unsteady steps, to hear their squealing laughter as I chased them around our backyard, swinging them around once I caught them until we were both dizzy and fell to the ground. The first day of school, the graduation, lying in the silent house for the first time after dropping them off at college, walking my daughter down the aisle toward a man that would never be good enough for her in my eyes, but giving her away regardless because she looked so damn happy. And in every one of my mind's images, it was Bella's eyes staring back at me from another face. Bella standing beside me and holding my hand in hers, lying next to me, as she was right at that moment for the rest of my life. Edward? Her voice sounded beside me, breaking me from my reverie. I turned my gaze to her, holding her hand against my chest and looking deeply into her eyes as I spoke to her softly. "Marry me, Bella Pav." My breath halted at his statement, so completely off topic from what we were previously discussing. Of all the things he could have said, nothing would have taken me by surprise more. I could still see the strain in his face of losing the little girl that night, but his eyes held a look I couldn't decipher, and it unnerved me. "Edward, I know you're upset, but..." He rolled on his side toward me, keeping my hand in his between us and resting his forehead against mine. "Tonight has been the worst night of my career so far, and nothing will ever change it. I know that. But it's also really made me think about what's important. A year ago, a night like this would have found me in a bar, and ended with Emmett carrying me in here after way too many beers. I didn't want that tonight. All I really wanted was to come home to you. And this is the way I want to spend the end of every day, good or bad, with you." I gazed at him in continued disbelief. While I had no doubts in my desire to spend my life with Edward, I really hadn't expected something so sudden from him. The lease on my apartment was almost up, and we'd barely made the decision for me to move in with him, and even that was after an extended discussion and lots of planning. Spontaneity had never been one of Edward's strong suits in the little over a year that I'd known him, and every instance of it was just as surprising as the one before, but that one was an entirely new level for him. "Bella," he whispered after a long silence, his hand closing around mine more firmly and nervousness filling his eyes. I cleared my throat and propped myself up on my elbow, lifting his hand to my lips and kissing it gently. "I'm not saying no, just not right now. And not because I don't want to say yes, I just want it to be for the right reasons. It is." I cut him off, releasing his hand and pressing my fingers to his lips. He closed his eyes and sighed, his body going lax into the bed. I cupped his jaw and leaned in to kiss him gently. "In 2 weeks, I'll be here all the time, and then you're never getting rid of me." I paused and he released a brief chuckle, his arm sliding around my waist to pull me against him. "You are everything I want, Edward. That's not going to change whether we get married now or 10 years from now." Edward's eyes flew open to look up at me with a stunned expression. 10 years? I couldn't help but laugh at the panic in his voice, and I stroked his cheek with my fingertips. "I'm not saying it would take 10 years for me to say yes, but I'll still be here in 10 years to say yes, if that's how long it took for us to get to that place," I said softly, lowering myself back down beside him and wrapping my arm around his shoulders. "Give us 3 months. Once we're living together full-time and adjusted, if this is still something you want, ask me again. I want us to do this right." Edward nodded, pressing his face to my chest, and I held him silently for hours. He gradually relaxed, and I could practically feel the tension slowly dissipating from his body, his fingers tracing lightly over my skin and absorbing the serenity of the moment. "I really do love you, you know," he mumbled softly as he finally began drifting to sleep. "I do know," I whispered, pressing my lips to his hair. "And I love you too." The following 3 months passed in a blur. The holidays had been hectic with the birth of Emmett and Rosalie's daughter, Emma, just after Christmas, and their visit to show her off shortly thereafter. Alice came to stay with us for a few weeks after a rocky breakup with Jasper, giving us an opportunity to mend some of the fences between us, before she eventually returned to the ranch in Texas with him. And then, of course, settling into living with Edward among the hectic hours of both of our jobs. I barely noticed the time passing at all. I walked into the apartment late one night, tiptoeing through the door so I didn't wake Edward. Yet when I turned toward the living room, my steps halted suddenly at the sight of tiny candles scattered throughout the open area, and the love of my life standing in the middle of the room, dressed in a black suit with a single red rose in his hand. Tears sprung to my eyes at the beauty of my surroundings, and I shakily set my purse and portfolio down on the floor, my previous exhaustion forgotten. I racked my brain as I began to walk toward him. We didn't have a date that night. It wasn't our anniversary or my birthday. My mind went completely blank. "Hey, baby, what's the occasion?" Edward smiled and handed me the rose, resting his hands on my waist and kissing me gently. "You." I sighed contentedly against his lips and wrapped my arms around him. I could get used to coming home to this. "Be careful, or you might spoil me." "I wanted this to be perfect," he replied, holding my face and gazing into my eyes. "You deserve it." His fingers traced down along my jaw as he lowered to the floor, kneeling down in front of me and reaching into his coat pocket. My arms wrapped around my stomach to halt the shaking of my hands as the realization hit me of what he was about to do. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but my smile pulled at the corners of my lips almost painfully. "Bella," he began, taking one of my hands from its tight hold at my side and holding a blue velvet box in the other. "Over the last 3 months, I've thought over about a million different ways to do this, from romantic dinners to weekend getaways, but nothing ever felt more perfect than right here, in the room where you changed my entire life forever on that computer over there. I know I'm nowhere near perfect, but in everything that we've been through, you've stuck by me even when you had every reason to give up. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you've made me from the moment you came into it. I want to make love to you every night, have babies with you, grow old with you, and complain about our aching bones and arthritis together." I laughed through my tears as he smirked up at me, kissing the back of my hand before releasing it to open the box, revealing a beautiful, yet simple, diamond ring. I was speechless as I gazed down at it, 3 stones set on a thin gold band, glistening against the flickering lights of the candles around us. Edward's eyes returned to mine, seriousness returning to his gaze. "Please say yes." I lowered into my knees in front of him, taking his face between my hands and pressing my lips to his, and then whispered, like I'd really say no. He exhaled a breath of relief, our foreheads pressing together briefly until he pulled back to place the ring on my finger. Our lips sealed once again, and I pulled him with me as I lay back on the floor, tugging his tie loose. We slowly undressed each other and made love until we finally made it to our bed just before dawn. His arms wrapped around me as we both gazed out the window in complete exhaustion until we fell asleep watching the sunrise. Thank God it was the weekend. The morning of our wedding was complete chaos, as weddings often are, but since both Edward and I didn't want anything extravagant, just to become Mr. and Mrs. Cullen after our idea of eloping was shot down by our mothers, we opted for a June ceremony in his parents' backyard. That left Esme and myself 3 months to get it all together and make sure my parents were there, which we managed almost completely without a glitch. That was until I woke up on the morning of my wedding, praying that I was still dreaming and in a terrible nightmare. Gray clouds covered the sky, and the rain that was supposed to hold off until the following day came down in a torrential downpour, and my tears flowed right along with it. My one wish for the ceremony was to have it outdoors, and of course, everyone knew it was bad luck for it to rain on your wedding day. Everyone, it seemed, except for my future mother-in-law. "That has got to be one of the worst old wives' tales ever told," she said, clicking her tongue as she zipped up the back of my gown, while Rose and Alice went to work on my veil. There was rain, sleet and hail coming down the day I married Carlisle. One of the hailstones even came through one of the stained glass windows and knocked my Uncle George right in the side of the head. And here we are, 32 years later, and about to watch our own baby get married. "It's you and Edward that will make it work, not the weather, Bella." From that moment on, practically everything was perfect. As I walked down the staircase on my father's arm, I spotted Edward standing under the archway that had been brought into the massive living room, and I instantly forgot everything that had been plaguing my mind. The where and how wasn't important, only that in a few moments, I would be holding his hand and binding myself to him forever. Once we'd exchanged rings and the justice began to speak to pronounce us husband and wife, Edward stopped him before he could continue and took my hand in his. My brow furrowed as he led me from the room and out the back door, where a misting rain still fell. "What are you doing?" I asked with a laugh and held up my skirt to keep from tripping, as we hurried across the wet grass, with the guests following us under a menagerie of umbrellas. We stopped on the bridge over the pond, and he turned to face me, claiming my other hand in his as well. "The one thing you wanted for our wedding was to get married outside. What kind of husband would I be if I didn't try to fulfill such a simple request?" My smile grew and tears formed in my eyes, hearing nothing passed by the power vested in me from the justice, when I felt Edward's hands rest gently on my face. His lips met mine before the final words even left the man's mouth, and I melted into the kiss. I didn't care that my dress was getting wet, or that my satin shoes were ruined. It didn't matter that on Monday, I would be returning to work instead of leaving on some extravagant honeymoon. They were just clothes, and a vacation we could take at any time. I was Mrs. Edward Cullen, and my world was absolutely perfect. Although having children was something that Edward and I both wanted, we decided to wait a year before we even began trying. Responsibilities with both of our jobs had increased, and we barely had time to see each other long enough to hunt for the house we wanted, as well as needed, in order to have room for a baby. Yet, when we finally moved into the 3-bedroom house we bought only a few miles away from his parents, I began feeling the itch I'd heard so much about from other women. One afternoon while Edward was at work, I sat for hours in the middle of the empty bedroom that would one day become the nursery, and my mind began whirling with ideas and plans. I could almost see the white crib in the corner, and the Winnie the Pooh trim along the pale yellow walls. I closed my eyes, and I could hear the gurgling across the room and the tinkling music from the mobile above. Before I knew it, I had tears streaming down my face and my arms wrapped around my waist. "Bella, what are you doing, baby?" Edward's voice came from the doorway, and I felt his hands rest on my shoulders as he crouched behind me. "Nothing," I replied softly, leaning back against him and pulling his arms around me. "Just a lot on my mind." "Like what?" He whispered against my cheek, kissing it gently as he lowered himself to sit completely. My stomach fluttered anxiously as I considered what I was about to say and what it could change with a few simple words. But I'd never wanted something so much since the moment I said I do, and it just felt right. "What would you think about moving up the baby-making a few months?" Edward was silent for a few moments, his arms tightening around my waist slightly before drawing in a deep breath. "You want a baby? Now?" "Well, I was just sitting here thinking tonight," I said with a sigh, turning my head to look at him. "Our lives are never really going to slow down, are they? And honestly, I could probably even work from home if I really needed to, so I could be home with the baby. I just don't think there's ever going to be a perfect time to have one." Edward's lips pursed slightly in thought, and he nodded slowly before his eyes returned to gaze at me. "Are you sure you're ready for that? The no sleep and 2 in the morning feedings while I'm on call, crying at all hours of the night, and I'm not just talking about the baby." I laughed softly and bit my lip, sliding my fingers between his on my abdomen. "Yes, are you?" My voice carried a tone of hesitance, waiting anxiously for his reply. When one didn't come after several long moments, I exhaled heavily and shook my head. "I'm sorry. This is really sudden and I know we said we'd wait. I'm not even sure why I came in here tonight." "No, it's fine, baby," he replied, clearing his throat as he spoke. "And yeah, I'm pretty sure I am." "Pretty sure?" I asked with an uncertain chuckle. Edward's laugh joined mine, and he rolled his eyes at me. "Did you take your pill tonight?" "No, not yet." My brow creased at his statement, and then I felt his lips brushing softly along my neck. "Now, it's never too early to start trying, right?" he replied, and I felt him smirk against my skin. I turned my body toward him, gazing into his eyes as his head lifted. "So, we're trying?" "We're trying," he replied, cupping my face with his hand and leaning in to seal his lips over mine. His tongue grazed mine and I froze, pulling back from him, and he gave me a confused look. "I don't know how comfortable I am doing this in the baby's room," I said, wrinkling my nose as I spoke. Edward laughed and slid back on the floor, standing and lifting me up to join him. "Can't have her traumatized before she's even conceived, right?" I shot back with a raised eyebrow. "Just a gut feeling," he replied, lifting me into his arms and carrying me into our bedroom. "Millions of women get pregnant every single day, some without trying or even by complete accident. Yet, as my 25th birthday approached, we'd been trying for 8 months, and I was still showing no signs of being pregnant. I hadn't been expecting anything to happen immediately, but I couldn't help the twinge of disappointment that rushed through me with every negative pregnancy test and subsequent period. Thankfully, Edward remained optimistic enough for the both of us, and never allowed me to lose hope that eventually, it would happen for us, making me all the more grateful that I had the amazing and supportive husband that I did. Just before Christmas, Edward announced that he had to leave town for a week to attend some conference, and my heart ached. We hadn't been apart for more than a couple of days while he was working since my move to Chicago, and even then, I had the knowledge that he was only a 20-minute drive away at most, and for the next week, he would be in San Diego, thousands of miles away from me again, and back to texts and Skype calls, if we were lucky. Kissing him goodbye at the airport was the hardest thing I'd done in more than 2 years, and I cried all the way home at the thought of the empty house and the cold sight of the bed I was returning to. I barely made it through the front door of our home before all the emotions caught up with me and I had to rush for the bathroom. The following night, I was anxious for his call, taking a long shower to kill a little more time. While making myself a cup of tea, I jumped at the familiar ring of the computer and hurried over to the table to accept the call, gazing at the face I missed at that moment more than anything. "Hi there, beautiful," he said tiredly, leaning back against the headboard of the hotel bed. "Hi," I replied softly, resting my chin in my hands. "You look exhausted." Edward rubbed his hands over his face roughly and drove his fingers into his hair. "It was just a very long, draining day, and I'd much rather come home to you than a computer. I think I can make it worthwhile for you," I teased with a grin. His eyes opened to look to me again, and he shook his head. "Baby, you should be resting. You said you didn't get much sleep last night. I'll be home in a few days." "Well, I wasn't exactly going there, but I've done more on less sleep than this with you," I pointed out, chuckling, "and it seems as if I'm going to be getting a whole lot less sleep than that in the very near future." "Huh?" Edward replied with a confused blank stare, and my smile grew. "Well, this is where we met, where we said I love you for the first time, and where I figured out that I couldn't spend another day without you," I began, leaning forward on the table. "I thought this should be the way I tell you Merry Christmas, you're going to be a daddy." I watched his face closely as it went lax, his jaw dropping slightly, but otherwise frozen in place. Through the webcam, it was difficult to tell if he was even breathing at that moment, and I barely caught the intermittent blinking of his eyes. His gaze snapped up as I said his name and his lips twitched before he covered them with his hand. "You're pregnant?" I nodded slowly, unsure what to make of his reaction. "Yeah, I was thinking about the way I was acting when you left yesterday, more emotional than I think I've ever been in my life, and then I got sick. But I was fine afterward, and then I got sick again at 3 this morning. I thought it was a long shot, but I went out and bought a test." I paused, pulling the stick out of the pocket of my robe and waved it in front of the cam, my eyes following it as I set it down on the table. I didn't want to jinx it or get our hopes up, so I didn't say anything. My gaze shot up again when I heard the distinct sound of him laughing, his hands covering his face with his head leaned back. They fell to his sides, and he began shaking his head with an unmistakable smile on his face. "Sorry, I know this really isn't funny, but that's the best damn thing I've heard since You May Kiss the Bride, and completely made my day worthwhile. The only thing that would make it better is if I were there to show you just how happy you've made me." 6 more days, baby," I said with a sigh, but feeling so much relief at the smile on his face. "You know," he started, relaxing back against the headboard again, and folding his hands behind his neck. "I think it was that time in the living room, when you were wearing that little purple thing I love. That had to be the one." "Oh God, Edward," I groaned, slapping my forehead with my hand. "You are such a guy sometimes." "Or maybe in the shower the next morning." "Yeah, that was a good one, too," he continued, seemingly not noticing my statement. "Honey, I know exactly how many times we did it that day. I was there, you know." I sighed with my head resting against my palm. "Just thought I should remind you, in case you forgot. Because I sure haven't," he said mischievously with a wink. "Baby, are you sure you don't want to do that tonight? You're going to be home in a few days, remember?" I retorted, bobbing my head sassily. He groaned and pouted a little, so I smiled teasingly back at him, though it would be a shame to not take advantage of a little late-night encounter like this. Edward's eyes widened in hope, and then the ass wiggled his eyebrows at me. "I knew you'd see things my way." I laughed, covering my face with my hands and shaking my head. "I see being tired is the last thing on your mind now." The computer dinged suddenly and I looked back to the screen. GRNEYEDDOC81. "So what are you wearing under that robe?" An unseasonably cold September rain pounded on the roof of my car as I pulled into my driveway for the first time in 6 days. After shutting off the engine, I remained there for an extra minute, staring at the front of the house. She wasn't at the door waiting for me as she usually would. There wasn't a single rustle of a curtain from inside, and that was when I knew without a doubt that my wife was pissed. If it wasn't for every room being lit from inside, I'd be a little more worried that there was no one in there at all. Not to say that there was any real credence to that fear, just one that terrified me more than anything imaginable. Bella and I had been married for just over 3 years, and our beautiful son, Connor Michael Cullen, was born the previous August, weighing just under 8 pounds, and with a full head of silky blonde hair. Unlike Bella or myself when we were little, the strands never darkened, and in fact grew lighter as the months passed, and it was difficult to imagine him any other way. Bella took to motherhood effortlessly, and I had to admit, I envied her a little. It was such a struggle for me to even get a diaper on straight for the first couple of months after he was born, while she could do it one-handed with her eyes closed and carrying on a coherent conversation all at once, and that was not an exaggeration. I'd actually seen the woman do it. And when it came time for her maternity leave to end when Connor was 12 weeks old, she sat me down one night and asked my thoughts on her taking an at-home position her company was offering and trying for another baby. It would be less income, but she would still be doing the job she loved, and financially, I knew it was more than feasible. We were both fairly frugal people whose largest expense aside from the monthly mortgage payment was the practical purchase of a new car for Bella after the baby was born. We didn't want or need much for material things, but we had talked about having more children shortly following Connor's arrival. We both hoped for one more, and given how long it had taken for us to conceive our son, we thought the sooner, the better. We wanted our kids to be close in age and before I turned 35 in just over 2 years. Just as with our first attempt to conceive, the second was just as difficult, and as of Connor's first birthday, Bella still was not pregnant and trying not to feel discouraged. Then 2 weeks later, all efforts stopped abruptly. The moment I told Bella that I would be out of town the week of her birthday for work, she became a little distant, sleeping with her back to me after a chaste kiss goodnight, pecking my cheek and waving goodbye when I left for work in the morning. Definitely not our usual routine. She insisted that she understood that the timing of the conference was beyond my control, but the hurt in her eyes was unmistakable. And this time, there was nothing I could do to make it right. I tried to get out of it, to no avail. No one cares that you're in the doghouse with your wife because of work until it happens to them. And all the higher-ups in administration were divorced. Big surprise. I offered to take her and Connor with me, but she insisted that it wouldn't be fair for a 1-year-old to be stuck in a hotel room all day. And I couldn't argue there. I suggested we go together, so we could at least spend the evening of her birthday together, just the two of us. But she was nowhere near ready to leave our son yet, and that's where her mind would be anyway. So, no matter which way I turned, it was a losing situation, and it had lasted nearly a month before I left. I had some major ass-kissing to do if I wanted to touch my wife in any way, anytime in the near or distant future. I reached over to the passenger seat for the dozen white roses I'd stopped for on the way home before running into the house. "Hello? Anyone home?" Bella turned her head toward me from her seat on the couch, giving me a small smile and standing to make her way over to me. "Hey, what took you so long to come in?" I leaned toward her to brush her lips with mine, resting my hand on her cheek. I'd missed her more than I could ever explain to her with words, and hoped that I wouldn't have to be away from her again anytime soon. Oh, a tiny voice came from the floor, and I pulled away from Bella to look down to the source. Big blue eyes stared up at me, and a tiny hand gripped onto my pant leg. It never failed to amaze me how much he was growing to look more and more like his grandparents, and less like Bella or myself. He had the blonde hair of my father, and my mother's eyes, and even inherited the hint of a widow's peak from Charlie. Yet, his mannerisms mimicked Bella's so perfectly without even trying, and if anything was going to delay my reunion with my wife, I couldn't think of something better than my little boy. "Hey there, little man," I said, waiting for Bella to take the flowers from my hand, and reaching down to lift him into my arms, kissing his hair firmly. "Oh, Daddy's missed you." "Do I? Oh," he repeated, and I glanced over to Bella, who merely smirked and turned away, stating she was going to find a vase. Oh what, buddy?" I asked as I turned my attention back to him. Oh," he repeated over and over. The first thought I had was of Emmett and Rose's little Emma, right around Connor's age, loudly announcing to anyone in hearing range whenever she had a dirty diaper. I hoisted him up more and took a brief sniff at his back. "Nothing, baby. What's wrong with Connor?" I asked worriedly, settling him onto my hip. "Nothing." "Why?" I heard her call back from the next room. Oh, because all he's saying is that? You're a smart man. I'm sure you'll figure it out," she replied, standing in the doorway with a cocked brow. "I'll start getting dinner ready." I watched as she disappeared back into the kitchen while bouncing Connor lightly through his endless chorus of ohs. I brought him back in front of me, holding him up beneath his armpits, and he let out a loud giggle. His swinging feet caught me square in the lower abdomen, causing me to grunt and shift my hips back on reflex before he struck me elsewhere. Oh, Connor announced a little louder while I set him on the floor, looking up at me somewhat nervously. "It's okay, buddy," I said, rustling his hair with my hand, but in the next breath, he began toddling around the room again with his chant. "Connor, can you show Daddy the, Oh, yes." I was quite aware of the lameness of that attempt, but I was at a loss as to what else to try. He tilted his head slightly as he gazed up at me, as if to say, "Yeah, Dad, like I'd really make it that simple for you?" A look he'd learned quite well from his mother. Nonetheless, I began following him on his trek through the house, looking under every table he crawled beneath, behind every lamp, and even inside his toy box. Nothing seemed misplaced, broken or out of the ordinary. I tried switching the movie that was playing on the television, grabbing his blanket from his crib. I even carried him upstairs when he climbed into my lap, pointing to my face with a loud exclamation of the two syllables that had begun ringing in my ears even when my child was completely silent. Again, there was nothing I could spot. All through dinner, I watched Bella as she ate without a care in the world while I was losing my damn mind and feeling like the worst father in the world. Nothing I did was solving the issue, whatever that might have been, because I sure as hell had no idea. As I gave him a bath before bed to remove the SpaghettiOs from his hair and face, everything seemed to bring on another utterance. Whether it was my fingers working the shampoo through his soft, baby-fine locks, or his hands running his toy boat in circles around him, or the harsh contact it made with the surface and causing water to douse my face and shirt. Connor murmured, much softer that time, gazing up at me as I gasped in surprise. I wiped my hand over my face and blinked repeatedly from getting bath water in my eyes. Looking back down to him, I lightly splashed his stomach to show him that I wasn't mad. However, that only resulted with him increasing his own efforts to drench me. I proceeded to bathe him, and once I'd finished, I had to grab hold of him before he streaked through the house, and then I changed him and put him to bed. I set his favorite stuffed penguin in the crib beside him, turned on his night light, and finally stood over him, stroking his hair until he uttered one last, in a whisper. With one final shuddering sigh through his nose, my little boy was sound asleep, and I quietly crept out of the room. I crossed the hall to our bedroom, standing in the doorway for a moment and watching my wife as she calmly read in bed. There was absolutely nothing wrong with him, was there? Bella's lips twitched slightly before she looked up at me, shaking her head slowly back and forth. Nothing whatsoever, just as I said. That was an entertaining 2 hours, though. I'm so glad you think so, I replied sarcastically, crossing the room to retrieve some dry clothes, as I still hadn't dried completely. After changing, I collapsed on my side of the bed with a heavy exhale, staring at the ceiling. The room was completely silent, save for the soft rustle of paper against paper, with each page Bella turned. I'm really sorry, baby. I know, it's fine, she said in an indecipherably flat tone as she continued to read. Why do you want another baby with me, Bella? I asked suddenly, and I finally felt her gaze upon me. What? She whispered with the first hint of emotion in her voice I'd heard all night. Honey, what are you talking about? I sighed and turned my head to look at her, meeting her gaze with mine. I can't get even the husband thing right. I wasn't here for your birthday, and I couldn't think of anything good enough to get you to make up for that. So I resorted to the lameness of flowers. I paused, watching her eyes widen infinitesimally. And I think I've proven tonight that I don't score much higher in the father category, either. Searching for some mystery problem that wasn't even there. Bella began shaking her head again as she closed her book, setting it on her bedside table, and sliding down to rest her head on her pillow, inches away from mine. Edward, you are an amazing father, and the fact that you care so much about something as simple as your son's new favorite sound doesn't take away from that. It just makes you that much more incredible. And as for the other part, her fingers traced lightly along my cheek and I closed my eyes at the sensation caused by her touch. I'd missed feeling her soft skin against mine, regardless of how slight the contact, and I was afraid to move, not wanting it to stop. You've never gotten the husband thing wrong, Bella continued, and my gaze met hers again moments before she shifted closer to me and pressed her lips gently to mine. I'm sorry I made you feel that way. I was upset, but not really with you. I just hate being away from you so much, and with everything that's going on, I really wasn't looking forward to spending my birthday without you. I might have been a little angry with her for shutting me out for an entire month, if it hadn't been for the look on my wife's face at that very moment. I knew that the passing months had been getting progressively harder on her, wanting another baby so badly, and not really having any reason why we couldn't. We'd had every test imaginable done, and still no answers. And now there was a sincere expression of embarrassment in her eyes and tears welling, that she tried hard to blink away. I was well aware that women could turn on the waterworks at a second's notice, knowing most men's weakness to it, but not my Bella. She despised to be seen crying for any reason, even in some of our toughest moments. The only time I'd actually seen her really do so without restraint or attempt to hide them was the day our son was born. I brought my hand to her cheek, stroking it gently with my thumb, before kissing her lovingly on the lips. So, was it really that entertaining tonight? I felt her forehead crease, and a moment later, she opened her eyes to look at me. They flickered back and forth between mine, clearly confused by my shift in mood, and began nodding hesitantly. Yeah, it was. I honestly thought you'd figure it out sooner. For such a smart man, you're kinda clueless sometimes. I gave a soft chuckle as she continued to gaze at me questioningly, sliding my hand down her arm to move around her back. Thanks a lot, baby. So am I forgiven, then? Her watery eyes crinkled at the corners, and she nodded, wrapping her arms around my waist. Now that I've gotten everything I wanted for my birthday, definitely. I gazed at her for a moment until she tightened her hold around me, slipping her leg between mine and capturing my lips with hers. Even after a baby and 3 years of marriage, she could still set my heart pounding with the simplest of looks or gestures, and was, without a doubt, the most beautiful woman in the world in my eyes. I remembered my father telling my mother when I was younger that he loved her more than the day he married her. By the time I was a teenager, I thought it was just some cheesy line he showered her with for a chance to get lucky or something equally as nauseating. However, as I gazed up at my wife when she rolled me onto my back and straddled my hips, I finally understood exactly what he was talking about. I was still falling in love with Bella every single day, always finding new things to love about her. It never ceased to amaze me that whether we were laughing or fighting, in the same room or miles apart, it didn't matter. Every ounce of love and passion I felt for her, I could see reflected in her eyes in no less than equal amounts. And I knew exactly what a lucky bastard I was. I love you, I whispered against her lips as my hands ran along her thighs to her hips just beneath the nightgown she wore that barely covered her ass. Bella's fingers traced along my jaw as she kissed me gently before opening her eyes. I love you. I've really missed you. I knew from the seriousness of her gaze and the desperate sound of her voice that she was not just talking about the time I'd been out of town. If there was any benefit to our relationship starting out as it had, that still held purpose in our everyday lives, it was in the way we read each other. We'd had to look beyond touches to find the intimacy between us and learn to communicate best through our eyes and tones. Little things that would go unnoticed by those people who'd always taken the physical presence of their spouse or significant other for granted. It was something we learned very early on that you could never do. I've missed you too, Bella, I replied softly, sweeping her hair away from her face and neck and twining it gently around my fingers. Our lips met again in a passionate kiss, and we sat up, her hands leaving my face to move down to the edge of her nightgown, slowly lifting it up her body. She broke away long enough to discard it to the floor, before her arms clung around my shoulders, pressing her breasts to my chest, and resuming the kiss heatedly. I groaned at the feeling of holding her and the rocking of her hips against me. The need to reconnect with each other hung heavily in the air, and was palpable in the way we were touching. And when her hands slid between us and inside my waistband, wrapping her fingers around my length and pressing me against her through our remaining clothing, I was consumed with need for her. The friction caused by her movements became too much, and I hugged around her tightly to roll her onto her back, grazing my tongue against her lips to deepen our kiss, and my request was quickly granted. I need you, baby, now. Please, Bella panted with gasping breaths as our kiss parted, her eyes heavily lidded with desire as she gazed up at me. Her fingers moved from my erection and gripped the fabric of my pants, shoving them down over my hips. When I rose a little to kick them off, she made fast work of her panties, and she was bare beneath me before I could even settle back between her legs. As I positioned myself against her, I felt her fingers grip my hair and pull me down to meet her lips as I slid into her. Our kiss muffled our groans against each other, and I remained stationary for a moment once I'd filled her. Fuck, she still felt so damn good, and after a month, I felt ready to erupt like an overeager teenager. Not what I had in mind. I began to slowly move inside her and her hold on my hair tightened, soft whimpers escaping her throat and her hips rising to meet each of my thrusts. We found a solid rhythm with one another, and as our lips parted again, our eyes locked and her fingers began twirling in my hair. Her teeth found her lip as I guided her leg up my side and pressed deeper within her, followed by a soft grunt and her toes curling against the back of my thigh. "Shit," she whispered huskily, gripping my shoulders and pushing me back on the bed, settling her hips over mine and holding my face between her hands. "Think you can keep quiet while I fuck my gorgeous husband?" I released a shaky breath as I felt her clench around me as her soft words ghosted over my lips, nodding slowly with my eyes closed. "Good," Bella replied with a smirk evident in her voice, obviously satisfied with my response. Her hands took mine from her hips and laced her fingers between mine, pressing them to the pillow as she rose and then slowly lowered on me again. "I need your cock deep inside me, making me see stars as only you can." My breath hitched as she dragged her teeth along my lip, pinching it with them gently. She hadn't spoken to me that way since before Connor was born, and it caused me to harden even more within her, my hips lifting involuntarily toward hers. Using her grip on my hands as leverage, she began rocking over me and steadily increased her pace with each movement until she was moving fluidly along my length and hissing between her teeth. I opened my eyes to watch the rare sight of my wife riding me in such an uninhibited manner, her face and chest flushing with the arousal coursing within her. I loved my wife and son more than anything in the world and wouldn't trade them or the life we had together for the world. However, there were times I missed moments like that, when we were just Edward and Bella, stripped down to the basics and the primal need we once felt for each other. "Fuck," I sighed heavily as she began rolling her hips with each descent, biting her own lip to restrain the groan I heard rumbling in her chest. "Baby, let me touch you, please." Bella squeezed my hands and shook her head, leaning down to kiss me enticingly. I'm almost there." I closed my eyes at her breathless statement, tilting my head back into the pillow as her pace quickened and caused my stomach to tighten. My fingers gripped her hands firmly as I fought to keep my hips still, knowing that one slight movement in conjunction with hers could spark my release, and I wanted to feel her come first. Bella's head lowered to my shoulder, and she gently bit my skin, arching her lower back slightly, and I could feel her clit rubbing along my length with every movement in and out of her. I sucked in a sharp hiss through my teeth, clenching them as her body tensed above and around me. Soft grunts escaped her while she orgasmed, riding me faster in response. "Bella, I'm gonna come," I panted, my voice a little louder than I'd intended. "SHH," she whispered, bringing her lips to mine to silence me. "Turn me over first." Sliding my hands from beneath her loosened grip, I took hold of her waist and flipped her roughly onto her back, eliciting a pleasured moan from her with the action. Her legs hooked around mine as I lifted her hands to pin them above her head, smirking as my hips slowed to tease her for a moment, and she growled, "Fuck Bella, you look so hot coming around me. I've missed that. Your lips, the smell of your hair, the way you taste," I said in low voice, accentuating with the flick of my tongue along her jaw. She moaned as I continued to move along her neck with my lips, eliciting the richest sounds from her, and she threw her head back, tugging at her imprisoned hands beneath mine. My turn. I thrust deeper inside her, causing her breasts to press against me with the arching of her back, eyes closing as her teeth clenched in restraint. "Oh fuck Edward, you like that Bella?" I taunted against her skin and her nails dug into the back of my hand, and I rose to watch her eyes lock fiercely with mine. It was such an arousing sight that I couldn't hold back anymore, tensing inside her with my release. Bella's arms wrapped tightly around my shoulders, pulling me against her as the feeling subsided, and I kissed along her neck while I fought to regain my breath. "We definitely need to do that again soon." My head lifted to look down at her again and watched her mouth twitch with a burgeoning smile before her eyes finally opened to gaze at me. Before our drought of the past month, I thought our sex life had still been great, but her words caused a shiver of doubt to course through me. Had it not been as gratifying for her as I'd believed? Since becoming parents, obviously, some of the spontaneity had dwindled, but I hadn't thought we'd lost the spark between us. Suddenly, she giggled softly and her fingers wove into my hair, kissing me firmly. "You crazy, wonderful man. I'm not complaining about our sex life," she whispered against me, her nails dragging lightly along my scalp. I sighed, resting my forehead against hers and cursing myself for being so damn transparent. My eyes closed at the embarrassment of the insecurities I thought had long disappeared, making an encore appearance, but her touch softened even more as she traced along my cheek with her nose. "I've never had a complaint about that, baby. It's just nice to see that my green-eyed doc is still in there from time to time." My eyes opened again in surprise, catching a brief glimpse of the wicked glint in her eyes before she kissed me feverishly. I groaned as I felt myself becoming aroused again within her and pressed my hips forward, causing her body to shiver, as well as my Bellanova. Bella smiled against my lips at my grunted statement, her hands lowering to my ass, and her muscles tightening around my reawakening erection. Up for round 2? We made fierce, passionate love again, and that time lay side by side in panting satisfaction when we finished, but our hands entwined between us. I love you, she whispered, turning her head toward me and kissing my shoulder. I love you too, I replied just as softly with my lips pressed against her hair. When she rolled onto her side to snuggle into my arms, we continued to lay quietly, but my mind began racing as I listened to the soft, indistinct murmurings of our son through the monitor on the bedside table. I knew he wasn't waking, he just had the tendency to talk in his sleep like his mother, but the sounds were thought-provoking, in complete contrast to what had just transpired in that room. Bella, yeah? She replied in a barely audible voice as her fingers traced lightly back and forth over my chest. I took a deep breath and swallowed hard, staring at the ceiling in silence, until I felt her head rise from my shoulder. My eyes shifted to hers, where I found her looking at me worriedly. If we never have another baby, we'll be okay, right? Wow, that came completely out of nowhere, she said, blinking repeatedly before rising up on her elbow and holding the blanket to her chest with the other hand. You think our marriage is conditional on how many children we have? No, I sighed, folding my arms over my chest. I just know how much you want another one, and I do, too. But if for some reason we can't. Bella waited for a moment as I trailed off and then began shaking her head. Then we only have one, and I'm definitely okay with that. We have a perfectly beautiful, healthy little boy in the next room, and I feel so happy and blessed with him. Will you be okay? I gazed at her as her eyes fell to my chest and wrapped my arms around her again, hugging her against me and kissing her hair. As long as I have you and Connor, I'll always be okay. Bella and I never did conceive again, but 4 years later, after being on a waiting list for 2 years, we became the parents to a set of twins, a boy and a girl, put up for adoption by a pregnant teenage girl. I'd been reserved at first when Bella suggested the route of adoption, sure that I could never feel the same connection to a child that my wife didn't give birth to as I did with Connor. That all changed the instant I held little Morgan in my arms and watched Bella cradling Patrick, with those telling tears in her eyes. I was holding our daughter, she was holding our son. Even genetics couldn't have made that feeling more real. We were one blissful, complete family with the two of us and our 3 beautiful children. Believe me, Bella, you will thank us for this in the morning, Rosalie insists, half carrying me across my apartment on one side and Alice on the other. You were getting way too touchy-feely with Eric. I roll my eyes with a scoff. Oh yes, I'm sure I will be so grateful for the sex I won't be getting after nearly 3 years of celibacy. You guys dragged me out today, and for what? To get me drunk and horny, just to spend the rest of my night alone? Which, I might add, I would have been doing anyway had you not dragged me out. For your information, vibrators and shower heads only do so much, and do not replace the need for a good, long fuck with a firm, hard co. Okay, stop right there. Way more information than we needed to know about you, Bella. Please do not finish that sentence, Alice adds with a chuckle and a soft snort, helping Rosalie to settle me onto my bed. My eyes narrow on her as they lift my shirt off and remove my jeans, leaving me only in my tank top and underwear. You started me on those Jell-O shots, knowing the yummy goodness of what was in those cute little cups, then you guys cockblocked me. There might not have been much down there, but it sure would have been better than nothing, which is what I'm left with now. Guess it's just me and my hand tonight. Good night, Bella. Rosalie cuts me off before I can go any further, laying me down and covering me over with my comforter. You guys suck, I screech as they walk out, and moments later, I hear the door of my apartment click closed and then, silence. How can I be expected to sleep this shit off when it is barely 5? It isn't even dark out yet. At least if we had attended an actual party, rather than a frat house barbecue with copious amounts of alcohol on a Thursday evening. Who does that shit anyway? It would be the wee hours of the morning by now, and I could pass out. Of course not. And now, I want sex, badly. I really wasn't kidding about that part. I slide my hand down my stomach and beneath the waistband of my underwear. If I can't have sex, I'm at least going to get off. I know the sound I utter when my middle finger grazes my clit makes me sound like an overacting porn star, but I can't keep it in. The last cock I've been close enough to in order to touch was in my freshman year, and when I'd cupped Eric through his pants tonight, sure it wasn't something to brag about to the girls, but at this point, a dick is a dick, right? Well actually, no it isn't. Maybe the girls did have a valid point about that. Yet, as my finger circles over the aching skin between my legs and gets me nowhere but frustrated, even Eric's pencil dick sounds really appealing. My mind is so fogged in my alcohol-induced haze that I can't formulate the mental images I need to get myself off. Son of a bitch, what does a girl have to do to get an orgasm around here? I yell out, retracting my hand from my underwear and throwing my blanket aside. I reach over to my bedside table, rummaging clumsily through the drawer to grab my bullet, but when the button accidentally hits the edge and turns on, I drop it like a hotcake. The vibration had caused an almost electrocution-type sting on my fingertips. Thanks to the alcohol, all my nerve endings feel like they are on high alert. Shit. I'm never gonna be able to sleep like this. Rolling out of bed, I stagger to the side, knocking into my bedside table before catching my balance. Two glaring reasons why I never drink. I'm an extreme lightweight and a very horny drunk. As I stumble out of my room, I ponder ways to work through the dilemma I'm in, and when my eyes catch my computer monitor, an idea strikes me. Obviously, my fingers alone won't get the job done tonight. I need some assistance. Erotica, surely, there must be something online that will give me the quick fix I need. It definitely won't be the first time. Some girls use erotica like guys use porn. Just saying. Once my computer powers up, I rest my chin in my hand and open my browser, clicking the bookmarks tab. Yup, I have an actual bookmark for such an occasion. What of it? Been there, done that, not interested seriously? I groan as a book popped up with a particularly ludicrous sounding premise that seems more like a sitcom than erotic fiction. I keep scrolling until my eyes pop wide open and I even push my chair away from the desk with a sharp gasp. Dinosaur sex? What the fuck? People actually find that hot? How? Yeah, this is not going to do it for me. Clicking the X in corner with frustration, I thrust myself back into my chair. I shift from side to side uncomfortably, and men complain about blue balls, like we don't suffer at all if we get worked up with no release. It's not like they can't go home, pop in some porn, and porn, eh? What the hell? Maybe actually witnessing two people fucking will remind me of what it's actually like and guide me to the promised land of the great-o. Honestly, I am desperate and willing to try anything at this point. PORN, and go, I say aloud with each key I tap, ending with enter. Instantly, millions of results are found, and I need to select one. How do people do this on a regular basis? Stop asking stupid questions, Bella, and just do it already. I'm dying here. I click the first link I see, and multiple screenshots of various couples, sometimes more in a plethora of positions and angles, fill my window. I select one that looks somewhat tame and recline back in my seat while it loads, but after a few moments, sit back up to hit the back button. That was a clear example of where every bad joke about porn ever told came from. I literally just heard the bo chicka wow wow in the tempo of the music. That thing had everything from the lame entry of guy in pants that were way too tight, just happening to walk in on the house guest pleasuring herself on the couch of the main living quarters, right down to the well, since you're already here, I might as well suck you off and let you fuck me 6 ways to Sunday. Oh yeah, that's realistic, and completely not helping me with my problem. I let out a loud growl of frustration, clicking the back button again, ready to give up and just wallow in my misery. As I said, I've been here before, many times since the last time I actually had sex. Why did I expect tonight to be any different? If only my friends had allowed me that one random hookup. Then the weirdest thing happens. Normally, I hate pop-up windows with those pointless ads that have no correlation to what you are doing, but for once, here is one that does. Chat live now, flashes in bold, yellow letters at the top of my screen. My curiosity is piqued enough for me to scroll down, past the naked woman pressing her clearly fake breasts together, in what I guess is supposed to be a seductive manner. What I find gives me a jolt of excitement. Find partners for sex chat, webcam sex, phone sex. Sign up for free today. Oh, perfect. I nearly groan, instantly clicking the link. Maybe this is what I need. Some live interaction with someone actually sounds fucking fantastic. Real-time cyber-sexing rather than inconsequential words on a page, or watching someone else get their fake jollies off. I get mine, he gets his. No ties, no worries about seeing him around campus the next day, no awkwardness. I start filling out my information, and I'm damn thankful for autofill since I'm drunk, biting my fingertip as I'm asked to pick a username and password. Come on, I just want to get cyberlaid. And I don't care if that's not even a word. And damn it, stop talking to yourself, Bella. So I type in the first things that come to mind. Username, Bellanova, password, BitKex form, and then, the bane of anyone's existence who has tried to quickly fill out information to proceed. Error. Password must include at least one capital letter and one number symbol. Fuck, I yell, slamming my palms on the desk and letting my head fall forward. Why do they have to make these things so difficult and complicated? All we want to do is get off. With a huff, I straighten up again and bring my hands back to the keyboard, altering the password to fit the criteria. Password, BIGCOCKS for me. And I'm in, I announce to the empty room, throwing my hands up in the air with my fists pumping the air. Okay, so now what? I begin scrolling through the page of members online, clicking on a few here and there, but there was always something off. Too cocky, too shy, old enough to be my father, and no, too, oh my god, he could skewer someone with that thing. Ow, no thanks. The site is fascinating, I will give it that. Yet, as much as I really want to get off, it can't be with just anyone. I need someone that will spark my imagination, paint me a mental image, if you will. Something needs to draw my attention and interest, and there's only so many times you can read "I've got a 10-inch dick" that will have you screaming all night, baby, before it starts getting monotonous, and that is not going to get me anywhere. And this ache between my legs is not dissipating either. I hurry over to the kitchen to grab the wine cooler out of the fridge I keep for special occasions, just in case I don't find what I'm looking for. Perhaps enough alcohol will finally knock me out. Okay, time to get a little more selective, I say as I sit back down, rolling my neck and bringing my fingers back to the keys. Gender, female. Looking for, male. Age, well, I don't want anyone too young. Even guys my age have a challenge with appealing to me most of the time. But definitely not too old either. 30 is my limit. Age, 25 to 30. Live chat, video chat, voice chat, live. That is a no-brainer for me. The more anonymous this remains, the better off I'll be. Hearing his voice or seeing his face will make things too personal, and that's the last thing I want. I hit submit and wait for the results, and surprisingly, there are plenty to choose from. Aren't men more of the visual, dirty talking types? The more I scan, however, the less I feel that I am going to find what I'm looking for. But something won't let me stop looking. I drain 2 more wine coolers and spend more time than I care to admit scrolling through the profiles and hitting refresh to see if anything new pops up. And then something does. GRNEYEDDOC 1981. 28-year-old SWM, experimenting in something new. Fan-fiction writer who tames lions in his spare time. Aspiring horticulturist, voted most likely to induce spontaneous ovulation by use of tongue. Once I finish giggling like crazy, I click the chat button. This is him, not too serious, obviously, yet not arrogant and bragging about the enormity of his manhood, but also here for a reason. The same reason I am: horniness. Bellanova, hey there. GRNEYEDDOC 1981, hi. The response is almost instantaneous, so I get comfortable in my chair again. Bellanova, saw your profile, nice new to this too? GRNEYEDDOC 1981, that obvious? Is he kidding? Fanfiction writer, tames lions, spontaneous ovulation by use of tongue? That has to be the most unique thing I have seen ever, not just tonight. Making fun of him might get him to run in the other direction, though, and that is the last thing I want, so I opt to reply with another factor. Bellanova, haha, I've been on here for a few hours, and you only just now appeared. GRNEYEDDOC 1981, you said too, so you are as well? Bellanova, yeah, really horny tonight. My hips shift and legs spread as I type, my hands slipping between my thighs, and massaging the ache I feel growing again. Say something dirty, please. But the cursor just keeps blinking. Did he leave? Bellanova, hello? GRNEYEDDOC 1981, me too. Our messages pop up simultaneously, and I breathe out a sigh of relief. Time to get this show on the road. Bellanova, so, doctor, I assume you really are a doctor? GRNEYEDDOC 1981, perhaps. Bellanova, tease. Oh, so you like to play games? Huh, I spoke out loud, bobbing my head slightly. Well, 2 can play like that. GRNEYEDDOC 1981. Yes, I am a doctor. Why? Belanova, I like Scrubs Easy Access. What would you have me do to you right now? My fingertips ghost along my neck as I stare intently at the screen, awaiting his reply. The anticipation is building more with the words GRNEYEDDOC 1981 is typing at the bottom of the chat window, and I even whimper in my anxiousness. GRNEYEDDOC 1981. I want your pretty mouth on my cock. Yes. Belanova, take it out for me. I lick my bottom lip in response and bite down on it, closing my eyes and envisioning this mystery man doing just that, untying those scrubs, guiding them down over his hips, and the most perfect cock I have ever seen standing before me, and waiting for me to wrap my lips around it. It's my imagination. He can be anything I want. Huge, perfect equipment and all. The reminder of that only serves to make me more anxious. Belanova, is it out? GRNEYEDDOC 1981. Yes. Belanova, you have some lube? GRNEYEDDOC 1981. Yes. Belanova, I want you to put some in your hand for me. While I wait for him to reply again, I lower my hand to start teasing the sensitive skin of my inner thigh. The sensations my fingers evoke cause my breaths to come quicker, my heart to beat faster. I have never missed the touch of a man as much as I do right now, and with just a few words on a screen, this guy already has me aching in ways I have long forgotten, and I am still clothed. When the ding of an incoming message emits from my speakers, a smile creeps across my face at the single word there. GRNEYEDDOC 1981. Okay. Now, what was it that Alice said? I ask myself quietly, trying to remember the advice my best friend had given me when I was still with my last boyfriend. The sex was, well, to be blunt, boring as fuck. So I had once asked her if she had any suggestions as to how to make things a little more interesting. Belanova, now fist your hand and make your cock slide inside really slowly for me. The cursor continues to blink for a moment, and I impatiently wiggle my hips toward my hand, aching for contact that I seem to be denying myself. I lick my lips as I envision the scene I am conjuring in my mind. On my knees in front of him, with his thick cock filling my hand as I tease the tip with light flicks of my tongue. Hearing the deep groan resonating in his chest when I take him in my mouth. Gliding my lips slowly down his length until he hits the back of my throat. Feeling his fingers weave through my hair as I draw back with just enough suction to making him moan in ecstasy. GRNEYEDDOC 1981. Fuck yes. Something like that. My hand moves up my abdomen to my breast, and as my palm cups around it, I feel the thick padding of my bra extremely counterproductive. Thanks, Alice and Rose. That shit needs to go, but first. Belanova, you like my mouth on your cock, Dr. Green Eyes? Can't have him going anywhere while I fumble with this evil contraption from hell. Even completely sober, this is a task in itself for me. Coordination is not my best friend. I curse through my frustration and ever-growing need as my body contorts to maneuver my way out of my bra. Just as I think the situation might kill my mood, it is reignited by two words. GRNEYEDDOC 1981. Yes. My hips shift again as his simple response catapults me back into the moment. I whip my bra through the armhole of my shirt and toss it across the room, settling back in my chair. My hand cups around my breast, massaging it through my shirt, and the fabric rubbing against my nipple causes it to tingle. I arch my back, pressing more firmly into my palm and release a deep groan. It has been way too long if just touching my nipple has me ready to spontaneously combust. I need more, and I express as much by telling him how wet I am. GRNEYEDDOC 1981. Feel yourself tell me how wet you really are for me. My hand trails down my stomach and slips beneath the elastic band of my underwear. A rush of tremors ripple through my inner thighs as I strike the bare skin of my clit, and I feel the skin of my throat flush with a wave of intense arousal. Fuck. Belanova, my panties are soaked. Doctor, what do you prescribe? There is a slight pause and my body jerks impatiently. Don't back out now, please. I beg you. I mentally plead as my fingers tauntingly circle my slick, hypersensitive skin. I have never needed to get off more than I do at this current moment, and having him bail on me now would suck. This is as close to actual human contact, aside from douchebags with their cocktail wieners like Eric. that I am likely going to encounter before I graduate, and that is still months away. No way am I going to last that long, so please, for the love of all that is, GRNEYEDDOC 1981, take them off stat. Thank the fucking heavens, I exclaim with a loud throaty exhale and type out as the doctor wishes, immediately shimmying the garment from my hips and down my legs, and kick them aside. My eyes lock on the screen, anxiously awaiting his next statement. GRNEYEDDOC 1981, put your fingers inside yourself, tell me how wet you are for my cock. That should not be sexy or appealing, but hot damn, is it ever? Guess when you're horny enough, the strangest things will work. I press two of my fingers inside, and my hips roll into my hand, grinding my clit against my palm. God damn, that feels so fucking good, I growl through clenched teeth, and bring my free hand back to the keyboard. Bellanova, so warm and so wet. GRNEYEDDOC 1981, I want 3 fingers in there, my cock is thick, it would stretch you. Oh fuck, I rasp, my head falling back against my chair. I'd always been more of an external stimulation type of getting off girl. Nothing in the world compared to a good fucking with an actual dick attached to a real live man. But 3 fingers just sounded uncomfortable. Ugh, stop thinking so fucking much, Bella. If you don't like it, you can always lie. Not like he can see you, right? Without another thought, I extract my hand and extend a 3rd finger, spreading my legs a little wider and slowly moving them back inside. The pressure it adds it fucking delectable, and I release a shameless moan that fills the room and possibly even resonates through the wall of the apartment. I couldn't possibly care less right now. This is just what I need, and those fuckers are likely just jealous that I'm getting some, and they aren't, well, in a sense. GRNEYEDDOC 1981, feel good? I lift my head at the message alert, and I hum in contentment. Dude, you have no fucking idea. I completely want to lose myself in this and the fantasy that I am creating in my mind. He is clearly just as into this as I am, so why should I hold back? I could go full throttle porn script on him, and it wouldn't matter. He's pretty dirty, too. So what the hell? Bellanova, so good, I need your cock in me so bad. GRNEYEDDOC 1981, not yet, fuck yourself with your fingers. On the first thrust, I feel my muscles tense and my breathing turns into full-on pants. Shit, is this what I've been missing over the last few years? Not a man, but still. My hand begins to move and my moans grow louder, the friction building up my orgasm, in rhythm with my palms striking my clit in tandem. Bellanova, so close, please. GRNEYEDDOC 1981, now stop, take your fingers out. No, I yell petulantly, ending in a whimper. That is just cruel. Oh fuck. What if he's into some sadistic, kinky shit? Honestly, I just want an orgasm so I can get to fucking sleep tonight. Bellanova, please, I need to come. GRNEYEDDOC 1981, pinch your clit. Are you fucking insane? I hiss at the screen, and just as I'm about to lie and say I did, I got curious. Why would he ask me to do that unless? Holy shit. I scream as I do as he instructed. I have never felt anything like that before. One would think that pinching sensitive, swollen skin like that would hurt like a mofo. However, if possible, it has made me throb in such a way that has only intensified the sensations coursing through me, and I'm actually even more horny. There is a pounding on my door, and a voice comes through asking if I'm alright. Shit, guess I need to think about keeping it down. Fine, scary movie, sorry, I yell out, definitely unwilling to get out of my chair right now, and leave this fucking genius. Bellanova, God please fuck me. GRNEYEDDOC 1981, how close are you now? Bellanova, very close. GRNEYEDDOC 1981, good, don't touch yourself until I say so. I grip my armrests tightly, my body coiled tightly and feeling ready to explode, and I'm not even touching it, and neither is he. This is definitely the weirdest and hottest thing I have ever experienced. The anticipation is killing me in the sweetest of ways, but the ache is growing to almost unbearable levels. I release my grip to type again, hissing as my hips tilt. Bellanova, fuck, please let me come, Dr. GRNEYEDDOC C 1981. Fuck, your mouth feels so good on my cock, throbbing so hard. Belanova, please don't tease. Envisioning my mystery man sitting there at the computer, stroking himself as he teases me, and knowing that he is fantasizing about me in this way as well, is more of a turn on than I care to admit. My hands grip my thighs, barely restraining from giving myself the release I so desperately need right now. C 1981. You still want my cock inside you? Belanova, please fuck me hard, I'm so wet and ready for you. C 1981. Slide your fingers back inside you, and imagine it's my long thick cock. Finally I close my eyes and drive my fingers back inside, thrusting furiously and building myself back up. So close, so fucking close. I need him to talk to me, push me further. Belanova, oh fuck dr. C 1981. Deep inside feels so good, deeper. Belanova, more fuck, please tell me more. C 1981. Close? Belanova, yes. C 1981. Stop. Belanova, no, God please no. I am legitimately ready to cry, my entire body now pulsing and throbbing. Delayed gratification can kiss my ass. I need a fucking orgasm already. He definitely knows how to make a woman crave, that's for sure. C 1981. How bad do you want it? Belanova, more than anything. C 1981. Suck my cock again, taste yourself all over me. Belanova, At this point, I am ready to indulge him in just about anything if it means that I get to come soon. I actually find myself closing my eyes again, conjuring images of me actually returning to my knees and taking him into my mouth, tasting the blend of him and me. My nails bite into the skin of his hips as I pull him closer, deeper. My imaginings feel so real, and my fingers begin to trail along my thigh, teasing myself just enough to keep my body tingling. C 1981. Tell me how it tastes. Belanova, C 1981. I want my cock back inside you. Belanova, fuck me now. Yes, he's as close as I am, and I'm going to get what I need. I hook my knees over the arms of my chair in preparation, and insert my fingers again, moving at the pace I imagine him fucking me. My mouth goes dry with my rapid breathing, my throat constricts. I feel like I'm literally teetering on an edge, rising higher with each motion of my hand and ready to fall. C 1981. I'm gonna come. Belanova, me too. My arm drapes across my face and I bite into my skin to muffle my scream, arching my back violently as I try to verbally coax the full throttle of my orgasm out of me. Come on, just a little more shit, yes. C 1981. Now. Belanova, fuck. How I managed to type mid-orgasm while furiously working my other hand to drag out every last trace of it, I have no idea. And let me just say, if this is the kind of shit I get from being loaded on Jello shots, I'm investing in lots of Jello, vodka, and ice cube trays. Even when the orgasm itself dissipates, the aftershocks are powerful, and my legs are trembling. It had to be the Jello shots. I don't come like that with anyone for any reason, when they are right there in front of me, physically touching me, fucking me, something. Then again, no one had ever done the things he had, taking the time to get me really worked up, pulling me back, working me up again, pulling me back. That shit definitely wasn't overrated. My eyes return to the computer screen, and the cursor continues to blink after my last statement. Had he gotten his and gone, without so much as a see ya, or did he think I had? Belanova, shit, you there? C 1981. Yeah, just wow. Belanova, I just came so fucking hard. You were incredible. C 1981. So did I, you're amazing. I'd say we could go for round 2, but I have to be back to the hospital in 6 hours. To be honest, after that orgasm, I am barely staying awake. Alcohol always takes its toll on me this way, and every muscle in my body seems to have slackened more as I came down from my high. I'm not far from a pile of goo in this chair, but I have the energy to tease him just a little more. Belanova, what a shame. I could go all night. I pause for a second without hitting send. I wonder. That was one of the best sexual experiences I've had in a long time that wasn't strictly solo. This guy talking me into a frenzy was seriously fucking hot and something I wouldn't mind trying again sometime. Maybe sober next time. Maybe not. This was pretty fucking fun drunk. Never know unless you ask Bella. Belanova, what time do you get off? This time. I hit enter and anxiously wait for his response, my eyes growing heavier. Come on, body, just a little longer. GRNEYEDDOC 1981, 6 Chicago time 18 hours from now. Belanova, wanna meet again? I'm in law, so 9 your time? GRNEYEDDOC 1981, I'll be here. I feel a lazy smile tug at my lips and nod as if he can see me. Belanova, so will I. Look forward to it. I'll be nice and wet waiting for you. GRNEYEDDOC 1981, I'll make you come even harder. Belanova, you promise? GRNEYEDDOC 1981, guarantee it. Belanova, oh good night doc. GRNEYEDDOC 1981, good night Bella. The last thing I remember is my hand slipping from the keyboard and my body growing heavy. Thank you Grenade doc.